Chapter 448. As soon as Yudan finished speaking, bang! There was a muffled bang. Without any warning, Sanguine directly threw a punch at Li Daochong. However, although this punch was fierce and fast, and no one saw how Sanguine attacked, Li Daochong still raised his hand to block it. The muffled bang was the sound of the giant fist hitting Li Daochong's palm. Li Daochong slid back more than 10 meters and stopped, a deep gully appearing under his feet. Sanguine showed a surprised expression. He didn't expect this human cultivator to be able to block his punch at all. Not only that, but he also acted as if nothing had happened. Sanguine looked at Li Daochong in surprise, but the latter had disappeared. Sanguine's eyes narrowed and he almost didn't see clearly. While he was in a daze, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. Li Daochong's face had some kind of indescribable excitement, like a primary school student who knew that tomorrow's spring outing was going to happen and couldn't sleep that night. He threw a punch. The first move of Fist of Rupturing, Swimming Dragon breaks the sea. Sanguine attacked as soon as he said he would, showing the authority and domineering aura that a grand wizard should have. Although he was rude and unreasonable, everyone felt that it was reasonable and normal due to the inherent mindset of a superior. When Sanguine appeared, everyone on the human cultivator's side showed fear. Many cultivators were so oppressed by the huge death aura that their legs became weak and they couldn't stand steadily. Not to mention fighting, they didn't even dare to look directly at him. However, not only did Li Daochong block the Grand Wizard's surprise attack, he also launched a counterattack in an instant. The human cultivator's side swallowed hard. This kid was brave but not scheming enough. Could he fight a Grand Wizard in close combat? Wouldn't that be courting death? When dealing with a Grand Wizard, human cultivators would open up a distance and use spells to attack. Only in this way could they exert their advantage. A Grand Wizard's wizard body was almost immune to physical attacks. Close combat was a Grand Wizard's strongest trump card. Almost every Grand Wizard was a humanoid tank that could ignore most physical attacks. At this moment, seeing Li Daochong rush up and punch the Grand Wizard, the human cultivators all turned their faces away, unwilling to watch anymore. Fang Yuliang wanted to remind them, but it was already too late. Grandma Fenghua shook her head and spoke, "Dao friend Fang, let's think about how to escape." Su Wanqing clenched her teeth and gripped her sword tightly, ready to enter the battle at any moment. A shock wave spread out in all directions. The surrounding cultivators were sent into disarray. Bang! After the shock wave passed, a muffled bang was heard. The speed of the chi wave was faster than the speed of sound. Only after half of the cultivators were sent flying did they hear a deafening sound. All the cultivators who didn't think that Li Daochong would be able to win against the Grand Wizard in close combat were stunned. Li Daochong's punch actually forced Sanji to take 7 steps back. What? Ayudan's mouth was wide open as she looked at her father in shock. Ayudan couldn't be more clear about her father's strength. No one knew better than Ayudan about how strong Sanji was. In the entire Rakshasa state, Sanji could definitely be ranked in the top 100. The Rakshasa state had nearly 1,000 Grand Wizards. Being ranked in the top 100 was enough to explain everything. Sanji was one of the stronger Grand Wizards. Sanji's strength was comparable to the false soul formation realm cultivators. Although it was only a relatively low-level senior Magus Ghost among all senior Magus Ghosts, it was still incredibly difficult for it to become a high-level senior Magus. Although the Rakshasa state had nearly 1,000 Grand Wizards, there were only a dozen high-level Grand Wizards. Just like the Shenghua Federation, there were very few soul formation cultivators. The soul formation realm was a watershed. Whether it was the spirit realm or the Hades, only when one entered the soul formation realm could one be considered an expert. The false soul formation realm was only one step away from the soul formation realm. Although it hadn't reached the soul formation realm, it wasn't far away. Ayudan found it hard to imagine that a Jin Dan cultivator could force a false soul formation realm cultivator back with one punch. How was this possible? However, this young man kept making the impossible happen. He made everything possible. What kind of monster is this? Ayudan looked at Li Daochong in horror. At this moment, she no longer had any sense of superiority as a superior grand wizard ghost. Ayudan had never felt such a chill towards a human cultivator like she did now. Sanji couldn't believe that he was actually forced back by an ant. Not only that, but his arm also went numb and the aura in his body became chaotic. The rupturing fists effect broke out, but Sanji was a grand wizard after all. The effect was completely suppressed in the end. After Li Daochong finished his punch, his figure flashed as he chased after the retreating Sanji and punched again. The second style of the rupturing fist, 100 Destruction Hammer Sky. Sanji was shocked. This human cultivator was clearly only a Jin Dan cultivator, so how could he be so fast? Li Daochong's extraordinary speed was due to the spiritual sun lightning. After condensing the lightning sphere in his body, he was supported by the lightning force when he moved. Although he wasn't as fast as lightning, it was enough to compete with a false soul formation realm cultivator. However, when using his fastest speed, Li Daochong's consumption was also shocking. 100 Destruction Hammer Sky. It looked like one punch, but in fact, it was 100 punches in an instant. It was just that the speed was too fast for the naked eye to see, so it looked like only one punch. Sanji naturally saw the mystery of this punch, and didn't dare to be careless. He roared and met it with a pair of huge fists. At that moment, in the eyes of others, it was just a single punch. In fact, it was 100 punches. Boom! A loud sound. Li Daochong retreated more than 10 steps, while Sanji retreated another 7 steps. Fellow Taoist Fong, is this old man's eyes playing tricks on him, or is he hallucinating? Grandma Fenghua couldn't believe what she saw. A Jin Dan cultivator and a grand wizard fought to a draw? Fellow Taoist Fenghua, you don't seem to be seeing things. Fong Yuliang stuttered. Su Wanqing's delicate face seemed to be frozen. She had already overestimated Li Daochong, but now she found that she still underestimated this guy. This kid, what did he go through? Su Wanqing muttered to herself. Li Daochong's wrist was slightly numb. Just now, it seemed that they were evenly matched, but in terms of strength, he was still at a disadvantage. Li Daochong had experienced too many battles in this period of time, and this was the first time he had lost in terms of strength. Good, ha ha! Li Daochong suddenly laughed and rushed up again. The third style of Fist of Rupturing, Outer Sky Shattering Moon. Sanji coldly snorted, Kid, you are very strong, but unfortunately you met this king. Today, this king will let you know that you should never fight with a grand wizard. As Sanji spoke, black gas burst out from his body. His dark green skin quickly wriggled, and a layer of scale-like skin appeared. Wu Sang Fist. Sanji's fist burned with black flames, and he punched out. Li Daochong's fist flickered with sparks of electricity. Boom! The two fists collided. It was like a landslide, and with the two of them as the center, a small mushroom cloud erupted. The ground burst open, and a deep circular pit about 1.5 kilometers Jin wide appeared. The two of them fell into the center of the deep pit. Then Li Daochong flew back 100 meters, and flipped in the air. Li Daochong landed steadily without losing his balance. Apart from his pale face, he wasn't injured. The excitement in Li Daochong's eyes disappeared, but his expression changed slightly. In this collision, Li Daochong was completely suppressed, and his qi and blood were slightly unstable. The human cultivators felt a chill in their hearts, knowing that the outcome was already decided. That young man might be a monster, but he was facing a grand wizard, an existence that could compete with a soul formation cultivator. The Yuanian cultivator was just a dish in front of the grand wizard, not to mention the Jin Dan cultivator. Sigh, this kid, I told him to run, but he didn't. He's finished now. Fong Yuliang shook his head and sighed. Fellow Taoist Fong, don't worry about that kid. Think about us. Grandma Fenghua said. Li Daochong, run! Su Wanqing suddenly shouted. It was a pity that such a talent fell. Su Wanqing didn't care so much. She couldn't do anything except warn Li Daochong. Even Su Wanqing couldn't interfere in a battle of this level. So powerful! Li Daochong looked down at his hand, which was slightly charred by the dark fire. This was the first time Li Daochong had suffered a flesh wound in a battle with the dark ghost. Sanguine's ferocious mouth with long fangs opened, and he licked his lips with his long tongue. He looked at Li Daochong as if he was looking at food and said excitedly, Kid, your human soul must be very delicious. After swallowing you, this king's strength will rise to another level and become a high-level grand wizard. Ha! Before his laughter fell, Sanguine had already appeared in front of Li Daochong. His fist turned into a claw, and he grabbed at Li Daochong's head. Swallow me! Li Daochong looked at Sanguine, who suddenly appeared in front of him, and smiled brightly. Just as Sanguine's huge claw was about to land on Li Daochong's head, a tsang ink light flashed. Clang! Sanguine's huge claw was blocked by a long sword that appeared out of nowhere, and a crisp sound rang out. Sanguine was stunned for a moment. When he saw clearly what was blocking him, he said disdainfully, Kid, you think you can stop me with this scrap metal? Dream on. Li Daochong licked his lips. Dream on? Are you the one who did it? 9 Split Saber Techniques 4th Stage, Heaven Collapsing Slash. Chapter 449. Whoosh. The tsang ink flashed. Sangji wanted to resist, but at that moment, he felt a chill run down his spine. He felt something was wrong and a bone spike pierced through his palm. Clang! The bone spike collided with the tsang ink. Crack, crack! The bone spike cracked. Sangji hurriedly retreated, distancing himself from Li Daochong. The tsang ink saber emitted a fierce aura that made him rather wary. Sangji glanced at the cracked bone spike and felt annoyed. This human cultivator could actually injure him. Human cultivator, are you trying to arouse this king's long-suppressed appetite? Sangji's dark red pupils emitted a greedy look. The stronger a human cultivator was, the more powerful their human soul would be. Whether the taste was good or not could be put aside. The key was to increase one's strength after swallowing a powerful human soul. Sangji sniffed. The fragrance of the human soul in the air fascinated him. He stretched out his hand and a 3-meter-long white bone spike appeared in his hand. Soul Devourer Spear! Fang Yuliang exclaimed. Grandma Fenghua's face tightened. She wanted to turn around and run away, but she didn't dare. Su Wanqing bit her lower lip. She had never felt so helpless before. As a top student of North Star University, she had been surrounded by stars since she was a child. Her talent was heaven-defying, and there were almost no opponents around her. Everyone looked up to her. She was regarded as the undisputed star of tomorrow. Even the principal of North Star University said that her potential was limitless. But at this moment, Su Wanqing discovered that those words of praise were more of encouragement. She wasn't as strong as she thought. In front of the Grand Wizard, Su Wanqing felt that she was just one of a group of busy ants on the roadside. Li Daochong held the tsang ink in his hand. His eyes were filled with fighting spirit. The temperature of the blood in his body rose again, completely boiling. When Sangji took out his magic weapon, Fang Yuliang and Grandma Fenghua, the 2 Yuanying cultivators, were so scared that their legs went soft. The power of dead souls emanating from the soul-devouring spear, as well as the dozens of Specter shaman spirits that could be seen with the naked eye, caused the spiritual qi in the human cultivators' bodies to be sucked away bit by bit. The spirits scattered in all directions. Sangyi didn't deliberately control them, and the spirits on the spear flew out naturally. Ah! A miserable cry sounded. A human cultivator with a weak cultivation base had a terrified expression. He opened his mouth, and a void figure flew out from within. Thud! That human cultivator's body went rigid. He fell to the ground, no longer breathing, dead. Soul-devouring spear, a high-grade magic treasure. It had a soul-devouring attribute. If one below the late Foundation establishment stage was not exceptionally talented, their soul would be automatically devoured. The body of the spear itself contained a powerful deathly energy. If a mortal were to get close to the soul-devouring spear, their soul would be directly controlled, and they would become the soul-devouring spear's slave. Just as that human cultivator fell, another scream was heard, followed by more screams. Dozens of human cultivators had their souls devoured. Their faces were filled with terror as they fell to the ground, completely dead. Rustle, 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 the sound of digging could be heard from the black, scorched earth. Then, a huge bump appeared. A skeleton beast that looked like a pangolin drilled out from the ground. Its nostrils on its head flared, and it quickly found a human cultivator's corpse. The skeleton beast quickly climbed up the corpse and began to gnaw on it. Then, several hundred skeleton beasts drilled out from the ground. This group of scavengers on 13 Specter began their cleaning work as if there was no one else around. The other human cultivators saw their companions' corpses being trampled and wanted to drive the skeleton beasts away. But just as they were about to act, Grandma Fenghua sternly stopped them. If you want to die, then do it. Although the skeleton beasts are only grade 9 ghost beasts, their way of life is like a nest of millions of them. Their outer armor is as hard as iron, and their claws are like hooks. If you anger them, they won't stop until you die. I'd rather face a grand wizard than face an army of millions of ghost beasts. After hearing Grandma Fenghua's words, the human cultivators who had just pulled out their weapons sucked in a breath of cold air. They could only watch as their companions' corpses became a delicious meal for these ghost beasts that were only the size of cats. The skeleton beasts only took a few bites before quickly dragging the corpses into the ground. Soon, dozens of human cultivators' corpses disappeared. The soul-devouring spear that had devoured dozens of human cultivators' souls trembled slightly in Sanji's hand. After eating its fill, it was somewhat excited. In just a few breaths of time, dozens of human cultivators were gone. Not even a trace of them was left. If the soul-devouring spear appeared on a cultivation planet, it would be a disaster. Even cultivators couldn't resist the power of the soul-devouring spear, let alone mortals. In an instant, the souls of hundreds of thousands of mortals would be sucked into the soul-devouring spear and become a feast for the ghost beast. Kid, you should be proud that you made this king take out the soul-devouring spear. A week ago, even your Yuanying Peak great cultivator couldn't force this king to use his weapon. You're the first human cultivator that this king has to use his weapon to deal with after coming to 13 Specter. You're much more interesting than those cowards, Sanji, he said in a contemptuous tone. Li Daochong tightened his grip on the Tsang ink in his hand and didn't say anything. His body trembled involuntarily. It wasn't out of fear, terror, or even fear. It was out of excitement, uncontrollable excitement. This kind of blood-boiling excitement made Li Daochong not want to waste any more words. Just fight. 9 Split Saber Arts 5th layer, *//. Swoosh. Li Daochong turned into a ray of light and shot forward. He swung the Tsang ink in his hand, bringing out a ring of starlight that looked like the night sky. However, this brilliance was many times more dazzling. Whoosh! Sanji raised his spear and a ring of black spear light shot out. Boom! The blade light and the spear light collided in the void and exploded in an instant. The ground shook in the explosion like an earthquake. The shock wave spread out several kilometers away, and wherever it passed, sand and stones were sent flying. A large pit was blasted open on the ground. The battle between a man and a ghost immediately became different after the use of weapons. It was many times stronger than the previous hand-to-hand combat. In the void, on the ground, and in the clouds, the Tsang ink's brilliance and the black and white intertwined spear light kept flashing. One moment it appeared here, and the next moment it appeared there. No one could see the trajectory of Li Daochong and Sanji's battle. They could only hear the roar, see the exploding clouds of fire, and feel the impact of the shock wave. If it weren't for the distance, the aftermath of their battle alone would be enough to kill them. Even Fang Yuliang and Granny Fenghua were a little overwhelmed. Of course, this was also because the two Yuanying cultivators were injured. As the battle continued to escalate, Su Wanqing's little remaining pride had been crushed into powder. Everything she had experienced in the past, after watching the battle between Li Daochong and the Grand Wizard, was just a joke. Every time Li Daochong swung his blade, he used all his strength. After experiencing countless battles, he had never been so carefree as today. The pleasure of being immersed in battle made Li Daochong incomparably carefree. Even if his strength was suppressed by the Grand Wizard, he could turn the tables in terms of speed and combat skills. This was a close combat battle. If either side made a mistake, they would be consigned to eternal damnation. After the upgrade, the Tsang Ink was already a mysterious spirit treasure level divine weapon. The Soul Devourer's Spear was a high-rank magic treasure, containing the spectral soul of the Hades abyss. It was one of the 4 high-rank magic treasures of the Hades. Every time the two weapons clashed, incomparably dazzling sparks would burst forth. In the sky and on the ground, explosions were everywhere. The planet's surface was already devastated, and in the battle between Li Daochong and the Grand Wizard, it was once again devastated, leaving behind deep pits. The ground environment of this area had even changed under the tremendous destructive power. Sanji had already erupted with his greatest strength, but he still couldn't defeat this ridiculously young man in front of him. For a Grand Wizard, this was already a disgrace. The game is over. Sanji pierced his spear and forced Li Daochong to retreat. Sanji held the Soul Devourer's spear in his hand, his mouth silently muttering some strange words that couldn't be heard clearly. In an instant, the death chi between heaven and earth surged and condensed on the Soul Devourer's spear. Ghostly wails and howls came from the void, and within a few kilometers, countless black shadows flew in all directions, as if 100 ghosts were walking in the night. Thousand Souls Devourer! The 3-meter-long white-boned spear in Sanji's hand turned into countless spear shadows, each one looked like a real thing, densely floating behind Sanji. Then, these spear shadows quickly condensed. At this moment, the death chi reached its peak, and behind Sanji was darkness, like the abyss of Hades, without a trace of light, only thousands of white-boned spears surrounded by the black death chi humming. Li Daochong was shocked. He turned his face and shouted to the human cultivators several kilometers behind him, "Run!" His voice carried the power of telekinesis, quickly penetrated the void, and the raging black soul shadows tried to stop the sound from spreading. But when they came in contact with the sound waves, they were immediately shattered and dissipated. A few kilometers away, a group of human cultivators heard Li Daochong's shout. They didn't understand what was going on. Fang Yuliang and Grandma Fenghua were shocked. They immediately propped up a barrier. The two of them activated their magic weapons and shouted, "Run!" The two Yuanying cultivators stirred up a gust of wind, rolling up hundreds of human cultivators, and fled with the fastest speed they could muster. Almost at the same time, the white-boned Soul Devourer's spear in Sanji's hand was thrown out. It turned into a black and white brilliance and shot towards Li Daochong. Thousands of white-boned spears behind him also shot out, as if thousands of mortars were fired at the same time. Amazing skill. Li Daochong had never seen such a large-scale move. Not only the range was large, but the power was also amazing. Each spear that shot out contained a ghost wizard spirit, enough to pierce through the Yuanying cultivators and devour Yuanying. This was the Grand Wizard's destructive move to devour human souls on a large scale. Li Daochong didn't stay idle while Sanji was accumulating power. He knew that the next attack would be the real battle. He lost. What awaited Li Daochong was death. This would be the most important battle after Li Daochong's awakening. If he could overcome it, he might be able to see the sun and see another world. If he couldn't, this life would end. Li Daocheng's eyes flashed violently with blue-gold lightning, his eyes shining, and his body was also wrapped in layers of electric current. Buzz buzz, the Tsang ink in his hand was also covered with a layer of electric sparks. The blade of the Tsang ink color had never been so bright. The deathly aura around Li Daocheng dissipated automatically. It was occupied by a strong spiritual aura. The spiritual aura kept expanding, driving away all the deathly aura within a few hundred meters. The faint Tai Chi pattern on Li Daocheng's palms became more and more concrete. The sword-shaped shadow inside it was spinning violently like a top. Li Daocheng activated a huge amount of spiritual aura, which was the limit of his ability. The pattern of the Great Void swordsmanship was activated, and he could slash out at any time. However, Li Daocheng didn't plan to use the Great Void swordsmanship, because with his current cultivation, he would be exhausted after one move. If he could kill his opponent, everything would be fine. If he couldn't, he would have no power to fight back. Li Daocheng didn't have any doubts about the power of the Great Void swordsmanship. He just felt that he couldn't unleash the true power of this mysterious swordsmanship. If he couldn't unleash the full power of the swordsmanship and was defeated, it would be a waste. Instead of using the Great Void swordsmanship, he might as well use the 9 cracks saber technique that he had mastered. When Sanji launched the Thousand Souls Devour, Li Daocheng also moved. Tsang ink faced the sky, and a huge saber shadow that was 100 meters long soared into the sky. Spiritual yang lightning flowed through the blade, creating a terrifying electric sparkle. The deathly aura was immediately annihilated when it came into contact with the electric sparkle. The 9th level of the 9 cracks saber technique, 9 cracks cut. Clang, clang, clang. The huge saber shadow split into 9, and Li Daocheng slashed out. The 9 huge saber shadows launched the 9 levels of the 9 cracks saber technique. What kind of move is this? In the distance, Fang Yuliang turned his head to take a look, and was stunned. How can a Jin Dan cultivator release such an amazing skill? Granny Fenghua's voice was hoarse, and she was stunned. Su Wanqing even forgot to escape. Floating in the void, she looked at the 9 huge saber shadows that soared into the sky in the distance, and her beautiful eyes revealed an indescribable throbbing. On one side, the deathly aura covered the sky, and on the other side, the spiritual aura covered the earth. 1,000 soul-devouring spears and 9 huge saber shadows. The two opposing forces, like 2 moving mountains, collided together. Boom! A loud noise shook the sky. A mushroom cloud that covered more than 10 kilometers soared into the sky. Rolling fire clouds rushed into the sky. Chapter 450. The moment they clashed, Li Daocheng felt a powerful devouring force trying to devour him. However, this feeling only lasted for a fraction of a second before disappearing. Yang Lightning's overwhelming effect on Hades's death aura exploded at this moment. In terms of pure strength, Li Daocheng was currently below Sanguine. However, Li Daocheng, who possessed the lightning power of Spirit Yang, had an innate suppressive effect on Hades' ghost. Whether low-level or high-level Hades ghosts, they were all afraid of the purest energy of the spirit realm. The lightning released by the 9 giant saber shadows was like a lightning tribulation, weaving a terrifying lightning net in the air. Boom! 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 More than half of the bone spears were reduced to dust by the lightning. However, how could the power of a grand wizard be so easily blocked? 1/3 of the bone spears still managed to pierce through the lightning net and shoot toward him. After being baptized by lightning, the bone spears changed both their speed and direction. Originally, all of them were heading toward Li Daocheng, but now they were scattered, with only a few shooting toward Li Daocheng. 1, 2, 3, 6. Li Daocheng counted silently in his heart. There were 6 bone spears left. Although Li Daocheng had used up a lot of spirit chi after releasing this move, he was not completely exhausted. Li Daocheng punched out with the shattering fist, outer sky shattering moon. The 6 bone spears were smashed to pieces, and the remaining force of the punch sent the dumbfounded Sanguine flying. Li Daochong had successfully neutralized Sanguine's strongest move, but the human cultivators who had not yet escaped too far had suffered. The remaining 300 white bone spears changed direction slightly and shot towards them. Fang Yuliang, Grandma Feng Hua, and several other Jin Dan cultivators desperately supported the barrier. Su Wanqing even used her trump card, the cyclic sky seal, which she had obtained from an ancient tomb. The cyclic sky seal and dozens of bone spears perished together. Although Su Wanqing felt some heartache, it was worth it to exchange an ancient treasure for the lives of hundreds of people and herself. The power of these bone spears had been greatly weakened by Li Daochong, but to these human cultivators who were originally prepared to flee, but failed to do so, the power of these bone spears was still extremely shocking. Each spear carried a terrifying power that was enough to completely kill and devour them. The barrier supported by Fang Yuliang and Grandma Feng Hua only blocked dozens of bone spears, and the rest all went through. Hundreds of human cultivators were pierced by a spear, and instantly devoured their souls, leaving nothing behind. The shock of seeing it from a distance was not as strong as experiencing it personally. When Li Daochong's amazing skill, the human cultivators instantly, they only saw 9 dazzling saber shadows to show to them. When the remnant bone spear traveled several kilometers, it still exploded with unstoppable lethality. Only then did all the human cultivators who were still alive feel how terrifying the Grand Wizard's attack was. Sangji Yi did not expect that the young man in front of him could not only completely block his strongest move, but also launch a second attack to send him flying. Li Daochong did not care about what Sangji Yi thought at this time. He stimulated the last of the spiritual qi in his body and fearlessly rushed forward. The Tsang ink kept chopping down. Sangji Yi was beaten back again and again. Every chop of the saber carried spiritual yang lightning. Li Daochong's whole body was wrapped in spiritual yang lightning. White smoke rose from Sangji's body, and his skin was burned by the spiritual yang lightning, emitting a burnt smell. Ayudan's mouth was wide open as she watched her father being beaten back by the human cultivator. She was completely dumbfounded. How could this human cultivator be so powerful? Sangji Yi's body was getting weaker and weaker. Knowing that he was no match for him, he used the last of his strength to throw away the soul-devouring spear and ran away. The bone spear turned into a white light and shot towards Li Daochong. But Li Daochong stretched out his hand and grabbed the soul-devouring spear that was shooting towards him. The ghost witch spirits on the soul-devouring spear poured out in an instant and invaded Li Daochong's body. Fang Yuliang, who saw this scene in the distance, was shocked. Not good, it's dangerous. Dozens of ghost witch spirits, which were more powerful than soul-catcher ghosts, all invaded Li Daochong's body, wanting to devour him completely. But when the soul-devouring spear's undead spirits entered Li Daochong's body, what greeted them was a huge blue mouth. If the Grand Wizard possessed his body, Li Daochong would be extremely afraid and would do everything possible to prevent the Grand Wizard's ghost from entering his body. But these ghost witch spirits were different. If you want to enter, come on, the more the better. Each of them was a delicious dessert after a meal. Beep. Killed one ghost witch spirit. Soul force transformed, spiritual qi gained. The prompt sounded again and again in the depths of Li Daochong's sea of consciousness. After dozens of streams of spiritual qi were produced, they were replenished in Li Daochong's Sun Jin Dan. This battle consumed a lot of spiritual qi. Li Daochong was not as relaxed as he looked. In fact, he had suffered internal injuries, and his Sun Jin Dan was dim. These streams of spiritual qi were just enough to repair his body, allowing Li Daochong, who was almost exhausted, to recover a little. Sangji fled into the rolling black clouds in the sky and disappeared in a flash. He actually burned his soul essence and blood and fled the battlefield at the risk of lowering his cultivation base. The great shaman had come with an awe-inspiring aura and then fled with his tail between his legs. He did not even care about his own daughter. Sangye fled without hesitation and did not even look at Ayudan. Ayudan helplessly watched her father flee and wanted to escape as well, but she could not move. Sparks of electricity kept coming out of her cheeks, which had been injured by Li Daochong earlier. The spirit yang lightning had sealed her death qi, so when she tried to circulate her qi, she would feel pain all over her body. Li Daochong glanced at the fleeing Sangye and did not chase after him. He could not catch up even if he wanted to. Even if the spiritual qi in his body was replenished, there was still not much left. Most of it was used to repair his body, so he could not use lightning escape. Li Daochong did not stop. He turned around and swooped down on Ayudan, grabbed the ghost witch girl, and quickly flew in the direction of the cultivators. When Li Daochong flew in front of the cultivators, everyone looked at him differently. Everyone's eyes flashed with awe. Even Fang Yuliang and Grandma Fenghua, the two Yuanying cultivators, bowed slightly. It was as if they were looking at a powerful senior. Li Daochong grabbed Ayudan with one hand, with a trace of unconcealable exhaustion on his face, and said to Fang Yuliang and Grandma Fenghua, "We can't stay here for long. The battle just now must have been noticed. If another strong enemy comes, I can't stop them. I'm not very familiar with 13 Specter. Please lead the way. We'll go to Demon Subduing City first." Fang Yuliang glanced at Ayudan in Li Daochong's hand. He did not know the girl's identity before, but now he knew. The Grand Wizard, who was beaten away by Li Daochong, said when he came, "Who dares to hurt my daughter?" The Grand Wizard's daughter was a princess in Rakshasa state. Her status was equivalent to a super genius cultivated by the Federation. Losing any one of them was a huge loss, therefore they were very valuable. At the very least, they could exchange captives with the Rakshasa state. Fang Yuliang thought for a while, then said, "Little brother, this place is still very far away from the demon subduing city. With so many people, even if we fly non-stop, it will still take us 2 days to arrive. With this witch ghost girl, it is impossible for us to hide. The death aura on her body will easily be discovered by the great shaman. Little brother, you are the only one here who can fight against the great shaman, but your current condition is not good. If another great shaman comes, we will all be wiped out." Li Daochong curled his lips. "Kill her?" As soon as these words came out, Ayudan, who was in his hand, tensed up. Her pair of dark red eyes revealed a look of fear. Death, no one wanted to die. Not to mention people, even ghosts did not want to die. After seeing Li Daochong's strength, how could Ayudan still have the heart to resist? Even her father, Sangye, was not a match for this human cultivator, let alone herself. For her great-uncle to die in the hands of such a powerful human cultivator, it was not an injustice. At this moment, Ayudan's intestines were green with regret. What kind of medicine did she take today? Why did she have to follow her great-uncle out to hunt? If she had stayed in Fengdu City as usual, she would not have become a prisoner. Fang Yuliang shook his head and said, "We can't kill her. It would be a pity to kill such a good spoil of war. I know of an underground cave nearby. There is a sealing spirit array there. We can rest there for a day or two before we set off." Li Daochong also wanted to find a place to hide and recover his vitality, so he said, "Senior, lead the way." Fang Yuliang nodded and then flew in a certain direction. Li Daochong, Grandma Fenghua, and Su Wanqing followed behind, and the other cultivators followed. Although it was said to be nearby, it was actually not close. Fang Yuliang took a big detour to avoid areas with more dark ghosts. Even so, it was inevitable that they would encounter some dark ghosts hunting along the way. Fortunately, they did not encounter any strong Grand Wizard ghosts. 3 hours later, under Fang Yuliang's lead, the cultivators arrived at a mountain range. The terrain here was extremely complicated. Spirit Qi and Death Qi were mixed together, and there would be explosions from time to time. The mountain range was vast and boundless. Tall and short mountain peaks intertwined, and strange rocks were everywhere. The landscape was complex and varied. A few mountain peaks towered into the clouds, and the top could not be seen. Halfway up the mountain, it was already deep in the gray clouds. Fang Yuliang flew into a short mountain and landed at the foot of the mountain. The other cultivators followed. After landing, Fang Yuliang pinched his fingers and calculated as he walked forward. Sometimes he went left, sometimes he went right. There were many stones scattered on the ground. At first glance, it looked very messy, but if one looked closely, they would find that these stones were not scattered randomly, but there was a method to it. Some of the human cultivators did not follow Fang Yuliang's footsteps and were soon separated. If Fang Yuliang had not used telekinesis to guide them, they would have been lost in the valley forever. When Fang Yuliang walked to the end, a huge stone door appeared in front of the cultivators. Li Daochong looked up at the stone door and could not help but sigh at the uncanny workmanship of the predecessors and the exquisiteness of the stone maze behind. Such a huge stone door was clearly in front of them, but they could not see it at all before they walked through the maze. The chaotic aura in the surroundings also added a layer of protection. Fang Yuliang opened the stone door according to a specific method, and more than 300 human cultivators entered together. Inside was a staircase about 5 meters wide that led underground. After everyone entered, Fang Yuliang turned a stone plate next to the stone door, and the stone door slowly closed. Fang Yuliang pressed a stone button in a hidden compartment, and the bottom of the pitch-black staircase was suddenly brightly lit. Everyone followed Fang Yuliang down the staircase, which was more than 500 meters deep. When they reached the end of the staircase, a huge underground secret room appeared in front of them. First, there was a very large hall about 1,000 square meters. There were many doors and passageways around the hall, and behind each door was a cultivation room. "Senior, why is there such a place here? Who built it?" Su Wanqing could not help but ask curiously. This was also what everyone was thinking. Li Daochong was also curious. After Fang Yuliang stepped into this place, his expression naturally revealed a trace of warmth, as if he had thought of a certain past. Chapter 451. This underground palace had a very complete set of facilities. It had almost everything that was needed: medical equipment, spirit liquids, cultivation rooms, and even some spirit grasses, ores, furnaces, and spirit brains. Everything was in preparation for war. It was a pity that he didn't use it, and it was wasted. Fang Yuliang arranged for everyone to enter different treatment rooms to rest, while Li Daochong grabbed Yu Dan and entered a relatively large cultivation room. Li Daochong urgently needed to recover his strength. There was not much spirit liquids here, so he did not want to use them. He had a lot stored in his storage ring, so it was fine as long as it was enough. Li Daochong entered the cultivation room and rudely threw Yu Dan to the ground. He had no patience or sympathy for this witch ghost girl. Not swallowing Yu Dan was already Li Daochong's greatest kindness. Yu Dan looked helplessly at Li Daochong with a pair of dark red eyes. She did not have any will to resist. The dark ghost body looked terrifying and ferocious, but at the witch ghost level, after condensing the dark ghost body. Witch ghost girls were all beautiful women, and they were even more beautiful than human Xiao. All the women in Rakshasa state were beautiful, but the men were the exact opposite. They all looked like ferocious monsters. As a princess, Yu Dan was naturally beautiful. Even in the Rakshasa state where beauties were as common as clouds, she was one of the top. When a witch of Rakshasa state ate a human soul, most of the time, they would first use their beauty to tempt the human soul, stimulating it to the most excited moment before enjoying it. This way, the soul power obtained would be even purer. In fact, Yu Dan had already used her unique charm witchcraft on Li Daochong many times, but it was completely useless. Li Daochong was like an iron tower. No matter how she teased him, he would stand there, not seeing, not hearing, not listening. Ayudan suspected that there was something wrong with this human Xiu's body. Even after releasing such a strong signal, it was still useless. Half of Ayudan's clothes fell off, revealing her fair and graceful skin that was as smooth as mutton fat. The left half of her chest, that was almost completely exposed, was even more alluring. A pair of slender and beautiful legs were intertwined as she lay on the ground. Any man who saw her would have a great fluctuation in their heart and would not be able to control themselves. Whether it was in front of human cultivators or in the Rakshasa state, Ayudan could charm all living beings. Without using any force, she could subdue every male creature that saw her. But today, for the first time, she had serious doubts about her appearance. Ayudan couldn't understand how Li Daochong had managed to slap her with such great strength. How had he done it? More than 10 years ago, Ayudan had entered a cultivation planet in the Federation's 8-ring star field to complete a mission. For more than 3 months, Ayudan only used one move to raise that cultivation planet to the ground. This move was known by the human cultivators as the honey trap. Li Daochong naturally didn't know about the fluctuations in Ayudan's heart. After throwing her on the ground, he began to busy himself with his own matters, preparing the spirit liquid vat and spirit liquid, as well as some top-grade spirit medicines. After Li Daochong finished his preparations, he suddenly looked at Ayudan. Ayudan felt a chill run down her spine and her vision went dark. She didn't know what happened next. Li Daochong made Ayudan faint, then sat down in the spirit liquid vat, swallowed 3 spirit medicines, and slowly closed his eyes. The spirit energy in his body recovered bit by bit. The psychokinesis technique was circulating at an astonishing speed. The Sun Jin Dan gradually recovered its brilliance under the nourishment of the spirit liquid, and it grew a little bigger once again. The amount of spirit energy needed to reach the peak of Jin Dan from the late stage of Jin Dan had reached another level. If he didn't kill a few grand wizard ghosts, it would be very difficult for him to level up. As Li Daochong circulated his mental cultivation method, he thought to himself, I wonder if there are enough dark ghosts for him to absorb in the demon-subduing city. Time passed minute by minute, second by second, and Li Daochong's condition was also constantly improving. The spirit energy that he had consumed was quickly replenished, but because his capacity was too large, he had consumed 3 jars of top-grade spirit liquid and more than 10 top-grade spirit medicines in half a day, and had recovered 2/3 of his spirit energy. The amount of spirit liquid that Li Daochong consumed was more than the amount of spirit liquid that all the human cultivators outside needed to heal. It was impossible to tell the time underground, but the wristwatch was still very accurate. 12 hours later, Li Daochong slowly opened his eyes, and a blue-gold light flashed past. Crash! Li Daochong stood up from the spiritual liquid vat. His healthy and beautiful body was suddenly exposed from the turbid spiritual liquid that had been completely absorbed by the spiritual energy. The waste liquid in the spirit liquid vat splashed in all directions and spilled out of the vat. A healthy and powerful leg was the first to step out of the spirit liquid vat. Li Daochong was completely naked as he stepped out of the spirit liquid vat. With a thought, one of the dozens of sets of green martial clothes in the storage ring instantly appeared and was put on Li Daochong's body. Li Daochong felt that although he hadn't leveled up, he seemed to have become stronger again. After fighting with the Grand Wizard, he had a lot of feelings. He had a new understanding of the skills that he had mastered, and even grasped the key point of the Great Void Sword technique. Perhaps he could use it in the next battle. Li Daochong lowered his head and looked at his hands. The Tai Chi pattern on his palms became more and more obvious, and the sword shadow in the middle seemed to have materialized. Li Daochong's lips curled up slightly. The feeling of becoming stronger was always so pleasant. Li Daochong glanced at Ayudan, who hadn't yet woken up, and stretched out his hand. The soul-capturing chain appeared in his hand. This kind of high-grade shaman treasure, whether sold to the Federation government, the underground city, or directly exchanged with the military, could be exchanged for astonishing resources. However, Li Daochong didn't intend to sell the soul-capturing chain. He wanted to refine the soul-capturing chain into a soul-capturing chain that could deal with dark ghosts, not human cultivators. The shaman spirit on the soul-capturing chain had been completely devoured by Li Daochong, leaving nothing behind. Even the aura of death had almost disappeared, leaving only a black chain. Li Daochong tied Yudan up with the soul-capturing chain, and then took out the soul-devourer spear for a look. This 3-meter-long spear looked like it was made of white bone from a distance, but it was actually a kind of metal that looked like white bone. Human cultivators called this metal white bone gold, and Hades called it yellow springs stone. The value of this thing was even greater than the soul-capturing chain. Li Daochong's harvest from this battle was quite bountiful, and the large amount of spirit liquid he had consumed to recover was nothing. When Li Daochong walked out of the cultivation room, there were still many injured people in the treatment room, but most of them had already recovered their vitality. When everyone saw Li Daochong come out, they subconsciously stood up and saluted, as if they had seen Yuanying beat up cultivators. Their faces naturally revealed expressions of respect. Among this group of human cultivators, Li Daochong's strength had already been fully recognized. Of the 300 or so human cultivators who survived, most of them were North Star University's new students who had been transported here as reinforcements. However, almost none of them knew that Li Daochong was also a new student of North Star University who had taken the military transport ship with them. Except for Su Wanqing. Most of the students thought that Li Daochong was either a member of the military or a ruthless person who had come to 13 Specter to seek gold. If they knew that Li Daochong was the same as them, this group of freshmen who had just been selected to enter North Star University would definitely be so shocked that their jaws would drop. Oh no, they would probably be so shocked that they would doubt their lives. This was because they were already very talented, but compared to Li Daochong, the difference was even greater than the distance between two shining stars in the starry sky. A small number of seriously injured people still recovered slowly even after soaking in the high-concentration spirit liquid. Time continued to pass, and every second, the situation in demon-subduing city would become more and more dangerous. Li Daochong learned from Su Wanqing. A week ago, their first batch of students came to 13 Specter through the teleportation array and were directly teleported to demon-subduing city. After Su Wanqing was teleported over, she immediately joined the battle. Demon-subduing city had almost been occupied by Rakshasa state, and only a few strongholds were still desperately holding on. These strongholds were all the key points of the spirit formation. If they were destroyed, demon-subduing city would lose its meaning of existence. It would be very difficult for human cultivators to control 13 Specter. This important planet that the Federation and Rakshasa state had been fighting over for hundreds of years would be completely occupied by Rakshasa state. The next step in occupying 13 Specter would be an all-out attack on the Federation. Because of the uniqueness of 13 Specter, it could be used as a springboard to send a large number of dark ghosts into the Federation's territory, which was impossible to guard against. Li Daochong was very clear about the importance of 13 Specter. Back then, his father, Li Tianyang, had also told him a lot about 13 Specter. This planet was almost the most important stronghold on the frontline battlefield. 13 Specter could not be lost. In order to save time, Li Daochong joined the treatment of the wounded. His participation greatly shortened the recovery time of the wounded. Li Daochong only needed to transfer pure spirit energy into the wounded's body, and they would be able to recover from heavy injuries within a few seconds. This miraculous healing technique once again shocked all the human cultivators present. Not only was he brave and good at fighting, but he was also a doctor with miraculous ancient medical skills. This was 2F*King shocking. The most important thing was that he was still so young. How could such a person appear in the Federation be unknown? However, no one knew who he was. After a night, all the wounded had recovered. Li Daocheng's consumption was not small, but it was still within the range that he could bear. The next morning, more than 300 cultivators walked out of the underground palace. Fang Yuliang recombined the spirit formation and the chaotic stone maze before leaving with peace of mind. In addition to the complete facilities in the underground command post, there were also a few small space shuttles. One of them was brought out. As long as one had enough spirit stones, the space shuttle would always be the best form of transportation. Cultivators could fly in the sky and burrow into the ground, but that would consume spiritual aura. The faster the speed, the more spiritual aura it would consume. Even if a foundation building cultivator traveled at full speed, it would still take more than 10 hours to cover a distance of over 10,000 kilometers. No one was willing to waste spirit energy for nothing. In the eyes of Jin Dan Yuanying cultivators, tens of thousands of kilometers was nothing. However, in such a dangerous place like 13 Specter, it was unwise to waste spirit energy in a hurry. Having a means of transportation was always the best choice. Yuanying cultivators all had their own personal flying magic treasure, not flying swords and other personal magic treasures. Fang Yuliang and Grandma Fenghua had one, but their flying magic treasure could not accommodate more than 300 people. The space shuttles were faster than ordinary flying magic treasures. In less than an hour, more than 300 cultivators arrived at a charred forest 500 kilometers away from Demon Subduing City. 500 kilometers was a safe distance. If they went any further, a big target like the space shuttles would be easily discovered. After discussing the remaining 500 kilometers, they decided to fly on their swords. Almost at the same time, in a stronghold in the northwest district of Demon Subduing City, Qin Zhan stood at the top of a tall building with a gloomy expression, looking at the surging ghost tide below. Qin Zhan, today's third wave of attack is here. What should we do? A young commander asked nervously. All cultivators are not to fight. Activate the protective shield and the spirit light cannons. Deploy the combat shuttles and fight immediately. Qin Zhan quickly gave the order. Yes. The young commander saluted and immediately left. 10 seconds later, the young commander returned with a flustered expression and said, Qin Zhan, Captain, you did not listen to orders and led the vanguard cultivators to fight. Bang. Chapter 452. Qin Zhan was furious and pushed the young commander away. However, when he walked out of the door, he returned. The anger on his face dissipated a little. He sighed inwardly. It was too late for him to chase after them. Qin Zhan looked out of the window. Hundreds of Vanguard Group combat cultivators rushed out of the protective shield under the leadership of Yu Yen and faced the ghost tide with their swords drawn. At night and early in the morning, the Rakshasa state had launched 2 general attacks, but they were blocked by the protective shield and the spiritual light cannons. However, there was not much energy left in the protective shield, and the spiritual light cannons did not have many spiritual light bullets left. An hour ago, when Qin Zhan gathered the senior officers to discuss countermeasures, he had a very fierce argument with Yu Yen. Qin Zhan believed that the third wave of attacks should still be focused on defense, preserving their combat strength, and letting the protective shield and the spiritual light cannons continue to consume the enemy's strength. After the protective shield and the spiritual light cannons were exhausted, they would gather all their combat strength to counterattack. Yu Yen fiercely opposed Qin Zhan, because once the protective shield was broken, the thousands of injured people and the same number of weaker staff in the stronghold would be massacred. At that time, no one would be able to save them. It was not that Qin Zhan did not understand this principle, but he actually wanted to sacrifice himself to protect himself. This stronghold was the last stronghold in the northwest city. If it was broken through, the northwest district of the Demon Subduing City would completely fall. It was almost certain that the defense of the demon-subduing city would fail, and some of the small towns in the rear would be completely exposed to the Rakshasa army. There were still hundreds of thousands of cultivators there, half of whom were injured and unable to fight, and the remaining half were already unstable. Most of these cultivators were exiles and would not risk their lives to participate in the battle. It was already good that they did not take advantage of the chaos to riot. In addition to these cultivators, there were also cultivators who came to the 13 Specter to seek gold, as well as tens of thousands of cultivators who were hired by the military to work for the 13 Specter. These people had no power to fight back against the dark ghosts. Qin Zhan had calculated the military strength of the two sides. If the stronghold could go all out and fight to the death, they could eliminate most of the enemy's forces and give the rear some time to breathe. It would take at least a few days for the Rakshasa state to gather so many troops again. Qin Zhan was thinking long-term. Yu Yan knew what Qin Zhan was thinking, but she didn't want to do that. Since the stronghold still had the ability to fight, she would fight. What bullsh*t was this about sacrificing the weak to protect the strong? As a combat cultivator, as long as he had a single breath left, there was only one strategy, and that was to fight to the end. Under the leadership of Yu Yan, the vanguard group rushed into the ghost tide. The group of ghosts wantonly fluttered in the air, letting out ear-piercing howls. At this moment it was like an infernal hell. Yu Yan was wearing a red battle robe and had 2 crescent-shaped daggers in her hands. She was the first to charge into the ghost tide. Immediately after, the hundreds of combat cultivators behind all disappeared into the ghost tide. For a time, the void was filled with sparks and explosions. The wraiths were torn apart by the vanguard squad's attack. The frontmost row was instantly annihilated by the vanguard squad's various saber beams and sword energies. The overall cultivation level of the combat cultivators in the Northwest Vanguard unit was not considered high. The strongest among them was only a mid-stage Jin Dan. But every combat cultivator in the Vanguard unit had been carefully selected to reach the great success stage of the body refinement realm. They were experienced in battle and had firm wills. They were almost impossible to be possessed by the ghost body. Even if they were controlled by powerful nether ghosts, they could still resist. When they could not withstand it, the majority of them would choose to die together. Behind every combat cultivator, there was a story that could make one sing and weep. In any army, the most dangerous force was the vanguard group. The majority of cultivators were not willing to join this group. The cultivators that could join all hated the Hades to the bone and had come with a deep grudge. They only had one goal for the rest of their lives, and that was to kill as many nether ghosts as possible. Killing one was one, killing two was a win. So, every slash of the saber and every slash of the sword was filled with endless fury. The vanguard group had always been the nightmare of the nether ghost. The 700 combat cultivators of the vanguard group were like a sharp blade that cut through the ghost tide. This gap grew larger and larger until the front row of the ghost tide was completely annihilated. Of the 721 combat cultivators, not one was killed. They could not fight alone. Fighting in groups was their forte. Every single combat cultivator pressed forward courageously, not even looking behind them. This wasn't recklessness, but rather trust. The brothers in the back would protect the ones behind them. Yu Yan floated in the air and looked behind her. The first wave of the ghost tide was made up of ghost bodies. The strongest were only at the level of malicious ghosts, and the majority were just blue ghosts. They were just cannon fodder. They were commonly known as ghosts and monsters. After the 721 combat cultivators of the vanguard group blocked the first wave of the ghost tide, they did not relax in the slightest. On the contrary, they became even more solemn. When a ghost tide was launched, it was usually divided into 3 waves. The first wave, ghosts and monsters. The second wave, ghost beast cavalry. The third wave, witch ghost. But this ghost tide did not act according to common sense. After the ghosts and monsters, there were no ghost beast cavalry. In the distant void, below a black cloud, on a massive screen, stood a group of witch ghosts, each of them exuding death chi that shot into the sky. A huge field of death chi surged over like a tide. The strength of the witch ghosts was equivalent to the Yuaniing cultivators. Although the combat cultivators of the vanguard group were powerful, a dozen of them could trap a witch ghost. However, the number of witch ghosts that came this time was in the 100. Obviously, the Rakshasa state had been unable to take down this stronghold, and their patience had been exhausted. They wanted to launch the final attack and take down the stronghold completely. On the black screen, Sanji, who was almost killed by Li Daochong a day ago, sat on a black throne in the middle with a furious face. Being beaten away was a disgrace to a grand wizard. After Sanji escaped, he immediately entered the witch blood pool to recuperate. He only barely recovered after absorbing all the human blood in the temporary blood pool. Then, Sanji gave the order to attack Demon Subduing City. Of course, his target was the young man Shio. How could such a terrifying genius be let go? Sanji also spread the news to 13 Specter. Before launching the attack, Sanji was worried that he would not be able to defeat the enemy. Not only did he transfer all his troops over, but he also invited 2 Grand Wizards to help him. One was the Grand Wizard County King Uramai, who had a fief in the Rakshasa state like Sanji. His strength was on par with Sanji, and he was even slightly stronger. The other was the Imperial Envoy Wu Ho. Intercourse. Intercourse's strength was not as good as a Grand Wizard's, but Intercourse's reputation in the Rakshasa state was well known. He was also an influential figure in the Rakshasa state. For a time, his strength was second only to the witch ancestor Wu Ho. However, he was seriously injured later and his realm fell. His current strength was only equivalent to that of a witch ghost. However, Intercourse was once a Grand Wizard. He was an extremely powerful existence among Grand Wizard. Now, even if his realm fell, his strength could not be underestimated. A weaker Grand Wizard might not be Intercourse's opponent. It was said that Intercourse had a Grand Wizard's underworld treasure given to him by Wu Ho. It could kill a Grand Wizard. Intercourse was ordered by Wu Ho's Cherry Blossom Gauze to come to 13 Specter to supervise the battle. With the commander's seal in hand, he could mobilize all the ghost army on 13 Specter at will. After being beaten, although Sanji was burning with anger, he did not let it get to his head. He knew that he would still be no match for that human cultivator if they fought again. Sanji was angry and afraid at the same time. However, after inviting 2 helpers, he felt a lot more at ease. No matter how powerful that human cultivator was, he was only slightly stronger than him. 2 Grand Wizards and 1 Intercourse with a Grand Wizard's underworld treasure. Even if a semi-god realm cultivator came here, Sanji was confident that he could fight. This time, not only did he want to flatten the northwest stronghold, but he also wanted to take that human cultivator's life. Sanji received information that the group of cultivators who came to support him had all come to Demon Subduing City, and that young human cultivator was one of them. Grand Wizard Sanji, is the human cultivator you mentioned really that powerful? Intercourse had a look of disbelief. Intercourse was very clear about Sanji's strength. He was ranked around 100 in Rakshasa state and was definitely a great expert. The powerful human cultivators on 13 Specter were all recorded on the roster in Intercourse's hand. There were even portraits, but Sanji said that the person who defeated him was not on it. Intercourse was puzzled. The Shenghua Federation and the Rakshasa state were constantly at war, and both sides had spies lurking in each other's territory. Chapter 453. Intercourse was not the only one who was puzzled. The other Grand Wizard, Uramai, was even more puzzled. When did such a person appear on 13 Specter? Uramai and Sanji had fought before, and they were on par with each other. To be able to beat Sanji away, Wouldn't that mean that he was in the divine transformation realm? At the very least, he had to be a late-stage or peak-stage Yuanian cultivator with extraordinary talent. Although the two of them were puzzled, they sneered at Sanji's state in their hearts. They even thought that this guy was hallucinating. As for the current battle, Urumai and Intercourse were not worried at all. With so many witch ghosts, this was already half of the forces attacking Demon Subduing City. Taking down this stronghold was not a matter of minutes. Yu Yen looked at the black mass of witch ghosts on the black screen and felt her hair stand on end. After experiencing so many battles, she had never seen so many witch ghosts move at the same time. This time, the Rakshasa state was ruthless. 721 combat cultivators' eyes were burning with anger, and the spiritual energy on their bodies erupted at the same time. On one side was death energy, and on the other side was spiritual energy. The two completely opposite auras collided in the void. Soon, the spiritual energy on the vanguard group's side was suppressed, and the death energy filled every area in the air. Qin Zhan stood in the temporary command building and looked at the void outside the window. A trace of seriousness appeared on his resolute face. With a slight sigh, Qin Zhan turned around and said to the young commander standing behind him, trembling in fear, "Take back my order just now. Gather all the cultivators in the stronghold who can still fight. Gather on the roof in 5 minutes and prepare to attack. For the wounded, let the logistics escape through the underground passage." "Yes, Qin Zhan," the young officer replied. Not long after, the stronghold command building began to operate quickly. The defense was done, and the rest of the old, weak, sick, and disabled were all moved out of the stronghold building and began to move towards the underground passage. At the same time, the battle in the void had already begun. Sanji couldn't wait to force that person out, and the best way was to launch a swift and violent attack. More than 300 witch ghosts were arranged in 3 rows. The first row of more than 100 witch ghosts attacked under Sanji's order. Wu Gui's strength was equivalent to a human cultivator Yuanian cultivator. The impact of over 100 Yuanian cultivators was extremely terrifying. Even if the vanguard regiment was brave and skilled in battle, they would still be afraid when they saw such a battle formation. Yu Yen gritted her teeth and gripped her crescent blade tightly. She was only at the early stage of Jindan. She didn't even have the confidence to win against a soul catcher, let alone a Wu Gui. Body-tempering Jindan cultivators were naturally much stronger than cultivation-type Jindan cultivators, but that was only in terms of close combat. There was almost no contribution in terms of long-range magic attack. To put it bluntly, if the distance was increased, then there would be no difference. Combat cultivators were living target. Of course, the vanguard regiment's equipment was still very advanced. Every vanguard regiment was equipped with the most advanced uniform equipment of the cultivation army. Naturally, the Northwest Vanguard unit was also fully equipped. There were 3 essential items: robes, sabers, and crystal shields. Small items included a dagger, 3 level 12 talismans, and a spirit explosion grenade. Facing the Wu Gui's attack, Yu Yen took a deep breath. Her towering and voluptuous chest rose to its maximum extent. She no longer had her usual charming and flirtatious appearance. Her eyebrows were filled with heroic spirit as she roared, "Kill!" Before her voice fell, she had already charged out. If Li Daochong saw this scene, he would definitely be secretly shocked. He didn't expect this woman, who usually looked more like a decadent prostitute, to have such a brave side. Who said that women were inferior to men? At this moment, Yu Yen was vividly reflected. Mu Guiying of a different world. Yu Yan's delicate body carried a weak aura as she was the first to charge into the group of Wu Gui. She looked extremely small and powerless. However, when Yu Yen slashed out with her saber, the crescent blade radiated a dazzling light. The Minotaur demon at the front of the Wu Gui held a spiked club in his hand. Looking at the human female cultivator charging towards him, he couldn't help but drool. So fragrant. I'll use you as an appetizer first. There aren't many opportunities to eat like crazy." Saying that, the Minotaur demon swung his club. Bang, crack, dang. 3 consecutive ear-piercing sounds rang out. The Minotaur demon opened his eyes wide in disbelief. Half of his body was chopped off. Yu Yan's blade radiance wasn't that powerful. It was able to block the Minotaur demon's club. Instead, 2 combat cultivators suddenly burst out with astonishing speed, surpassing Yu Yan. One was on the front and one was on the left, attacking at the same time. The Minotaur demon was caught off guard. Before he could swing his spiked club, it was blocked. Yu Yan's blade radiance hit the Minotaur demon. Damn it! The Minotaur demon, who had lost half of his body, cursed. Ignoring the black blood spurting out from his wound, he turned his head and bit the combat cultivator on his left. Crack! That combat cultivator's shoulder and arm was bitten off. The Minotaur demon swallowed him. Half of his body wriggled and slowly grew back at a speed visible to the naked eye. Although the newly grown shoulder and arm were a bit thinner than before, his battle strength recovered by more than half in an instant. The Minotaur demon grabbed the combat cultivator, whose shoulder was about to be chopped off, and was about to swallow him. The other combat cultivator roared and rushed forward to help. The Minotaur demon swung his hand and sent him flying. Then he opened his mouth and bit down on the head of the combat cultivator in his hand. Swish! The moment the Minotaur demon bit down, a silver crescent blade came from above and pierced through the Minotaur demon's head. Yu Yan came down from the sky and stabbed with her blade. She landed on the Minotaur demon's shoulder. Fuck! The Minotaur demon opened his mouth wide. One could clearly see the blade stuck in his throat. If a human cultivator received this kind of attack, unless they were Yuaniing cultivators, they would definitely die under Yuaniing. The Minotaur demon angrily roared. He raised his hand to grab Yu Yan, who was standing on his shoulder. Yu Yan had no choice but to let go of the blade. She did a backflip and dodged the Minotaur demon's claw. The Minotaur demon didn't chase after grabbing empty air. But he was angry and directly tore the combat cultivator in his hand in half. Boom! A loud explosion rang out. The combat cultivator, who fell into the Minotaur demon's hands, knew that he couldn't escape. Before he died, he detonated the 3 talismans and the spirit explosion grenade. The cloud of fire exploded and thick smoke billowed. The smoke dispersed. The Minotaur demon's body was covered in blood. Although he wasn't dead, he was in a sorry state. Moo! A loud bull cry rang out. Compared to a domestic bull, this sound was much more terrifying. It was like the cry of a demon bull that came from the depths of hell. The Minotaur demon's eyes popped out from the explosion. He looked like a demon from hell, fierce and terrifying. He still wasn't dead. Yu Yan's face was slightly pale. 3 level 12 talismans and spirit explosion grenades. The power of the explosion was enough to flatten an entire street. A huge crater would appear at the center of the explosion. The Minotaur demon was at the center of the explosion, but his physical body was still there. Only his skin and flesh had been blown apart. His body was terrifyingly strong. Human cultivators like Yuaniing would also be seriously injured in such an explosion. Their spiritual bodies would be damaged at least. The weaker ones would probably have to abandon their physical bodies. Yuaniing would escape. The aftermath of the explosion spread at least 500 meters in the void. At this moment, the entire void was in chaos. The vanguard group's combat cultivators attacked a single witch ghost. Almost all of them used suicidal attacks. Facing the witch ghost, these combat cultivators only had the cultivation of Jin Dan or Foundation establishment. Other than suicidal attacks, they didn't have a better way to injure the witch ghost. It was only because Yu Yan was present that they were able to injure this ox-headed demon to such an extent. In other battles, if 2 combat cultivators didn't die, they wouldn't even be able to touch Wu Gui's skin. In just one exchange, Over 100 combat cultivators of the vanguard group died. But none of them were devoured by the witch ghost. The Northwest Vanguard group only had one will. I can die, but I can't let you eat me. This was a legion that gave the ghost army a huge headache. But these valiant combat cultivators didn't manage to kill a single witch ghost. Their casualties were 0. The huge difference in strength couldn't be made up even with suicidal attack. Yu Yen watched as her subordinates fell one by one. Her beautiful eyes trembled slightly. Holding back her tears, she roared, "For tomorrow's peace, kill!" Without hesitation, Yu Yen rushed towards the Minotaur demon that was already badly mutilated. Although the witch ghost's casualties were 0, their attacks were still blocked. They couldn't advance. The vanguard group's combat cultivators charged forward, using their own bodies to build a bloody wall. Sanji's order came again. The second row of witch ghosts also charged. The already weak vanguard group was already on the verge of collapse. How could their flesh and blood withstand the attacks of so many witch ghosts? Yu Yen was filled with despair. She raised another crescent blade and slashed at the Minotaur demon. No matter what, she had to kill one first. The Minotaur demon was panting heavily. His eyes were blasted open so he couldn't see the outside world. But the witch ghosts didn't just use their eyes to see, they also used their death intent to sense. Yu Yan's every move was under the Minotaur demon's perception. Clang! Yu Yen slashed down, hitting the Minotaur demon's raised arm. But it only went in half an inch. The witch ghost's body was too strong. It wasn't afraid of normal weapons. Yu Yen didn't want to give up. She wanted to slash again, but her strength was limited. The injured Minotaur demon was still above her in both speed and strength. The Minotaur demon grabbed Yu Yan's head. Its claws were like hooks. Once caught, the head would be crushed. In the blink of an eye, bang! A muffled sound broke through the air. But when the sound came, a dazzling light had already passed through. With a bang, the Minotaur demon's upper body exploded in front of Yu Yen. Black blood splattered everywhere like rain. Yu Yen turned her head to look. In the air behind her, Qin Zhan was holding the latest Spirit magnetic light sniper rifle. Chapter 454. The two high-ranking generals looked at each other in silence. Nothing needed to be said. Quarreling was quarreling, and fighting was fighting. When facing the Hades, they were very clear about their identities and goals. Yu Yen nodded slightly at Qin Zhan. The latter returned the gesture with a solemn expression, indicating for the former to be careful behind her. Yu Yen understood tacitly. Qin Zhan raised his spirit magnetic light sniper and fired. Whoosh! Bang! There was a flash of light. Yu Yen was already prepared. She leaned to the side and the beam of light swept past. But a witch ghost that had ambushed Yu Yen from behind had its upper body blown to smithereens, just like the bull demon. The Spirit Magnetic Light Sniper was the latest high-energy sniper rifle developed by the Federation's top cultivation research institute. In terms of experts, the Federation could not compare to the Rakshasa state. After the Dark Ghosts invaded the spirit realm, they obtained a large amount of soul resources and many cultivation planets that could be nourished by them. Thus, after the Great Calamity, the core forces of the Hades sprung up like bamboo shoots after a spring rain. In the Rakshasa state alone, there were hundreds of thousands of witch ghosts, and nearly 1,000 grand wizards. This was a super strength that the Shenghua Federation could not match. Although human cultivators were the fastest and most efficient in cultivation among all the races, they could not compare to the Hades, who had devoured more than half of the spirit realm. And the reason why the Hades had finally stopped in front of the human race was not only because the human race had produced many geniuses and powerful figures. The Dharma treasures that could resist the Hades were actually a great improvement in cultivation technology. The emergence of all kinds of spirit magnetic weapons, spirit talismans, and large puppets was the greatest capital and reliance that the Shenghua Federation could rely on to compete with the Rakshasa state. Otherwise, if they only relied on cultivators to fight, they would have been swallowed up by the Rakshasa state 800 years ago. That would not have lasted for so long. For example, the front lines of the Rakshasa state were guarded by a grand wizard and hundreds of witchcraft generals. If it was just a melee, they could kill you in a matter of minutes. However, the human race is powerful in that, other than my own cultivation, I also have a brain that can create many powerful magical treasures and weapons. Sometimes they didn't even need to fight. They just needed to wear them down first. For example, the Spirit Energy Magnetic Field Light Sniper Rifle could kill Wu ghosts. Each Spirit Energy Magnetic Field bullet contained a Spirit Energy Magnetic Field array that could deal astonishing damage to a single target. Once hit, it would be a headshot. It was just that this thing was extremely complicated to make. The price was ridiculously high, and the materials used were also very rare. It was also very difficult to create spirit magnetic bullets, and an army could only have a few of them. Ammunition was even more scarce. Even though Qin Zhan was the Legion commander, he was only equipped with one gun. He only carried 10 rounds of spiritual magnetic bullets with him, and they would be gone once they were used up. Every shot was filled with money, enough to buy an entire cultivation metropolis. The price was ridiculously high. Therefore, Qin Zhan was not very happy when he killed 2 Wu ghosts with 2 shots. The heaviness on his face did not decrease in the slightest. There were still 8 spirit magnetic bullets left, and they would be gone once they were used up. There were more than 8 Wu ghosts in front of him. He had killed 2 Wu ghosts in an instant, but on his side, the number of combat cultivators that had fallen was more than 20 times. The vanguard group had already lost 200 combat cultivators, and the casualties of the Wu ghosts were almost negligible. More than 100 cultivators followed behind Qin Zhan. Among them, more than 30 Yuanian cultivators were the last remaining forces. Most of these Yuanian cultivators had survived in the demon-subduing city, and a small portion had been brought by Qin Zhan when he came to support them. There were very few students in the North Star University in the northwest stronghold of the demon-subduing city. At that time, when they were distributing the troops, Qin Zhan wanted to relieve the pressure on the other stronghold. He took on the task of defending this stronghold by himself. In the past month, Qin Zhan had brought more than 5,000 soldiers, but they had suffered heavy casualties. Nearly half of them had sunk forever on this Dark 13 Specter, and would never be able to return to their homeland. Most of the remaining half were exhausted and could no longer fight. Qin Zhan had already properly evacuated them from the demon-subduing city. Behind him were the last remaining soldiers of Qin Zhan. More than 30 Yuanian cultivators faced more than 300 Wu ghosts. Whether it was in terms of quantity or quality, the difference was too great. Among the more than 30 Yuanian cultivators, there were only 3 Yuanian late-stage cultivators, and the only Yuanian peak-stage cultivator was Goddess Hong Yang. As the only Yuanian peak-stage cultivator in the Northwest Army, Goddess Hong Yang looked down on the entire Northwest Army and was everyone's spiritual support. Goddess Hong Yang reached the Yuanian stage 50 years ago. After that, she made rapid progress and cultivated to the peak stage of the Yuanian in less than 60 years. She was one of the members of the most mysterious and privileged department of the Shenghua Federation, the ancestor of the Divine General. Goddess Hong Yang had a great chance of becoming the next Divine Transformation Realm cultivator. The Federation was always looking forward to the growth of the Divine Transformation Realm cultivators. It was just that, in recent years, the advancement of the geniuses had been very weak. At the beginning, they were very fierce, but the more they advanced, the weaker they became. More than 100 cultivators, with Goddess Hong Yang as the center, lined up in a row and rushed toward the group of Wu ghosts. There were also more than 10 cultivators with various long-range weapons in their hands, ready to cooperate at any time. When they saw that their companions were in trouble, they would immediately help. The vanguard group's combat cultivators, who were almost unable to hold on, were relieved a lot after this group of regular cultivators joined. The chaotic battle in the void became more and more intense. What was a bloody storm? At this moment it was. The rain of blood kept falling from the sky and dripping on the scorched ground. Soon, it was absorbed by the dark scorched ground and disappeared, as if it had never existed. The battle was so fierce that even Qin Zhan, who had experienced countless battles, rarely saw it. The number of human cultivators kept decreasing. Only half of the combat cultivators of the vanguard group were left. More than half of the regular cultivators who joined the battle later were killed or injured. Only about 30 Yuanying cultivators were left. It seemed that they were about to collapse. Sangji saw that it was about time. He waved his hand, and the last row of more than 100 Wu ghosts all moved out and joined the battle. Roars, shouts, they rose and fell in the void. Blade auras, sword auras, and talismans flew in all directions. The Wu ghosts released all kinds of dark arts and black auras, and ghosts danced in the sky. The human cultivators tried their best, but they could only hold on for about 10 minutes. They were beginning to lose. Qin Zhan commanded the dozen or so long-range cultivators at the rear to keep shooting talismans, spirit light cannons, and spirit magnetic light sniper rifles. There was not much ammunition left. The number of Wu ghosts killed did not exceed 30. The number of human cultivators killed had exceeded 400. After the last batch of Wu ghosts joined the battle, the cultivators retreated step by step like leaves in the wind. Qin Zhan shot 5 times in a row and killed 4 Wu ghosts. However, this was just a drop in the bucket. It could not change the situation of the battle at all. Qin Zhan had expected this result, but he did not expect it to come so quickly. He estimated that they could hold on for at least half an hour. Now, they could not even hold on for 20 minutes before they were completely defeated. It was not that the combat cultivators of the vanguard group did not fight hard enough. It was just that the huge gap in strength was not something that could be made up for by fighting hard. Suicide attacks could not cause fatal damage to the Wu ghosts. Moreover, not every suicide attack could hit the target. More than half of them were blocked by the Wu ghosts' dark arts and magic treasures. The remaining half required the sacrifice of 3 or 4 combat cultivators in exchange for the serious injury of 1 Wu ghost. Killing them was harder than ascending to the sky. At this moment, the burden of the battle was all on the shoulders of more than 30 Yuanying cultivators. Their bodies were made of iron, and even nails could be hammered into them. Even Goddess Hongyang could not stop such a large army of Wu ghosts. Goddess Hongyang controlled her life-bound magic treasure, the rainbow flying swords. 108 flying swords danced in the air. Wherever they passed, the Wu ghosts would be injured. The weaker ones were killed on the spot. Yuanying's terror as a peak cultivator was fully displayed at this moment. However, before the enemy's great shaman had even joined the battle, Fairy Hongyang had already unleashed her most powerful attack. After killing more than 10 Wu ghosts, Sanji could not sit still anymore. He looked around for a long time, but he could not find the young cultivator who had beaten him like a dog the day before. Urumai looked at Goddess Hongyang in the distance with great interest. A hint of greed appeared in his eyes. TSK, who would have thought that there would be such a sweet female cultivator here? Yuanying is at his peak. If I could devour Yuanying and refine her body into a Wu puppet, I would be able to serve by my side forever. Just thinking about it makes me happy. Just as Sanji was about to join the battle, Urumai had already shot out towards Goddess Hongyang. He held a soul-devouring halberd in his hand. Chapter 455. The soul-devouring halberd in Urumai's hand turned into a ray of black light and shot out. Skeletons formed from black clouds appeared on the halberd. Every skeleton was like a demon from the netherworld. They spat out hellfire and charged towards the flying swords. 3 of the black skeletons coiled around a flying sword. The 108 flying swords that were full of momentum suddenly stopped in the void, unable to move an inch forward. Ka-ka, dang-dang. Ear-piercing sounds of metal rubbing against each other could be heard in mid-air. The black skeletons bit on the flying swords. Their originally illusory forms turned solid. Since the hellfire could not burn the flying swords, they opened their mouths and bit. There were 108 Hongyang flying sword. Every single one of them was a mystical spiritual treasure that contained an artifact spirit. However, all 108 of them were mystical spiritual treasures. That was quite terrifying. Even so, these mystical spiritual treasures could not withstand the corrosion of the hundreds of black skeletons. Goddess Hong Yang's expression was serious. She raised her slender hand slightly and several rays of light flew out from her fingers. The 108 Hongyang flying swords hummed softly under the suppression of the black skeletons. The swords that had dimmed suddenly flashed with silver light. The hibernating artifact spirits in the swords were all awakened. Sword spirits flew out from the swords and instantly destroyed the black skeletons in pure spiritual energy. Urumai smiled when he saw his attack being neutralized. He was not surprised at all. If a peak great cultivator like Yuanying could be defeated so easily, it would be too boring. Urumai extended his hand and the soul-devouring halberd flew into his hand. He muttered a few words and the black gold surface of the soul-devouring halberd quickly softened and wriggled. It turned into a hell serpent dragon that grew bigger and bigger and entered the black clouds above. At the same time, Goddess Hongyang was not idle. She shouted, "Hongyang demon slaying sword formation." The 108 Hongyang flying swords that had awakened their artifact spirits formed a sword net. All the sword spirits that flew out from the swords stood on the swords and spiritual energy surged around them. Swoosh! They shot out at the same time. Their astonishing skill was enough to pierce through all obstacles in front of them. A dozen or so shaman ghosts that didn't manage to dodge in time were pierced through by the sword formation and turned into honeycombs. Spiritual energy invaded their bodies and exploded from the inside out. Every shaman ghost that was pierced through turned into black rain and fell to the ground. The other shaman ghosts dodged in fright, not daring to get close at all. Urumai hovered in the air as he looked at the sword formation heading towards him. He had no intention of dodging at all. Instead, a mocking smile appeared on his face. The sword formation swept forth like a storm and was about to strike Urumai. Roar! 1,000-foot-long hell serpent dragon roared and pierced through the black clouds. It charged towards the sword formation like a bolt of black lightning striking down from the black clouds. It was none other than the soul-devouring halberd that Urumai had just tossed out. The black dragon and the sword formation collided in the void. Boom, ka-ka-ka, lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. The black nether lightning on the black flood dragon wove into a huge lightning net, entangling with the sword formation. The two enormous forces refused to give way to each other. The shock waves that erupted from their clash sent the shaman ghosts and human cultivators flying. The shaman ghosts that were closer to the battle were instantly engulfed by the black nether lightning and sword chi. On the human cultivators' side, the remaining Yuanying cultivators received a telepathic message from Goddess Hongyang. They immediately tried to provide assistance. The human cultivators suffered far fewer casualties than the shaman ghosts. However, there were still a dozen or so combat cultivators who were too close to the battle and couldn't escape in time. Even the shaman ghosts couldn't withstand the clash between the Grand Wizard and Yuanying cultivators. Over 100 shaman ghosts were injured by the shockwaves, while a few dozen shaman ghosts were annihilated in the void before they could even react. It was as if they had never existed. Urumai and Goddess Hongyang were both mighty figures close to the soul formation stage. The techniques that they unleashed already possessed the power to destroy heaven and earth. After a brief stalemate, the two enormous forces were finally unable to maintain the violent effects brought about by the compression. The center of the two forces became more and more unstable. Boom! There was a deafening bang. The two forces of energy exploded with terrifying energy in the midst of annihilation. The entire void seemed to have been ignited. Billowing waves of air violently flew in all directions. Wherever they passed, everything was swept up and taken away. Even at a height of several thousand meters, the terrifying explosive force could still affect the demon-subduing city on the surface. The two streets below were swept to the ground by the waves of air that came from above. Fortunately, the energy didn't explode in the demon-subduing city. Otherwise, the entire city would have been razed to the ground. Goddess Hong Yang spat out a mouthful of blood. She clutched her chest and her face was slightly pale. Her beautiful eyes were filled with fear as she looked at Urumai in the distance. This wasn't the first time the two had fought. Goddess Hong Yang had encountered Urumai when she first came to the demon-subduing city to provide support. However, both sides didn't use their full strength at that time. They only probed each other for a while before stopping. Moreover, at that time, Fairy Hongyang was wearing a battle suit, and her entire face was covered. That battle suit was a heavenly mystic battle suit that the Cloud Jade Company had custom-made for Goddess Hongyang. It could withstand a Level 1 Divine Transformation Realm Cultivator. Even so, the battle suit was shattered during Goddess Hongyang's last battle. However, in exchange, she killed a Grand Wizard of the Rakshasa state. At this moment, Urumai was also staring at Goddess Hongyang. The Grand Wizard's eyes were filled with mockery, and he was unscathed. The demon-slaying rainbow sword formation scattered in all directions. The 108 flying swords were all damaged and cracked. At least half of the sword spirits were annihilated. On the other hand, the Soul Devourer halberd was almost unscathed. It was just that the Black Abyss Flood Dragon was beaten back to its original form. Urumai stretched out his hand, and the Soul Devourer halberd flew back into his hand. Goddess Hongyang, I've heard that your demon-slaying rainbow sword formation is the most powerful sword formation in the Federation. No one below the soul formation stage can break it. Looks like you're not in your best condition today. Urumai was still trying to show off. Goddess Hongyang recalled her flying swords. Her heart ached as she looked at her bonded magic treasure, which had been reduced to such a sorry state. It was as if she had dug out a piece of her own flesh. After losing half of her flying swords, the demon-slaying rainbow sword formation could no longer be unleashed. Goddess Hongyang could no longer unleash her most powerful attack, and a bleak expression appeared on her gorgeous face. If it weren't for the fact that her flying swords had been damaged in the previous battle, she wouldn't have been able to recover from her exhaustion. As such, the demon-slaying rainbow sword formation wasn't able to unleash its full power. It was only about half of its full power. Otherwise, Urumai wouldn't have been a match for Goddess Hongyang. Cultivator Yuanying of the Federation's Divine Generals was equivalent to a high-level Grand Wizard of the Rakshasa state. He wasn't someone that a Grand Wizard like Urumai could defeat. The Federation couldn't compare to the Rakshasa state in terms of raw power, but they were definitely superior to the Rakshasa state in terms of quality. However, the Federation couldn't compare to the Rakshasa state in terms of top-tier combat prowess, so they could only rely on cultivation techniques to make up for it, which ancestor Wu Ho's power had already reached an extremely terrifying level. Even the average soul formation stage mighty figure was no match for her. Chapter 456. Goddess Hongyang turned a deaf ear to Urumai's words. She focused her telekinesis, and the 108 flying swords quickly fused together. In the blink of an eye, all of the flying swords had fused together to form a single flying sword. The entire flying sword was over 160 meters long, and it hovered beside Goddess Hongyang like a silver rainbow. This was the true Rainbow Flying Sword. Rainbow Flying Sword was the name of a high-grade magic metal. It was extremely rare within the Federation, and a single piece was enough to make a Yuanying cultivator extremely rich. The rainbow flying sword had extremely unique properties. It could be split or fused together. It was very similar to clay, and its density could also be changed at will. However, the rainbow flying sword would become weaker after splitting. In its original state, the rainbow flying sword was a heaven mystic magic metal. After splitting multiple times, it would eventually become a tong mystic magic metal. The 108 flying swords that goddess Hong Yang was controlling were all split from a single flying sword. This was not some illusion technique, nor was it pure energy condensed from spiritual energy. This was a true flying sword, and every single one of them was a true flying sword. When they fused together, they would become a heaven mystic magic treasure. All of the remaining weapon spirits would also fuse together. Urumai's expression of mockery changed slightly. He did not expect goddess Hong Yang to still be alive. Urumai waved his soul-devouring halberd, and a black streak of light that was several hundred meters long tore through the air. Goddess Hong Yang's slender hand suddenly pushed forward, and the rainbow flying sword transformed into a rainbow streak of light that shot forth. Boom! The black streak of light and the rainbow streak of light clashed, resulting in a loud explosion. Urumai continued to swing his soul-devouring halberd, and huge black streaks of light that were shaped like sickles shot out continuously. On the other side, goddess Hong Yang continued to swing her hands, and the rainbow flying sword transformed into rainbow streaks of light that danced through the air and clashed with the black streaks of light. Boom! Boom! Every collision would result in an earth-shattering explosion and a dazzling explosion of light. The witch ghosts and human cultivators had no choice but to retreat more than 10 kilometers away from the clash between these two mighty figures. Anyone who got close would be injured or even destroyed by the shockwaves. Sanguine ordered the ghouls to avoid the shockwaves and continue attacking the human cultivators. For a time, in the void, one side was a clash between two powerful beings, while the other side was a chaotic battle between several hundred Wu ghosts and human cultivators. Qin Zhan, who was standing at the edge of the protective shield, looked at the battle in the void. The situation was getting more and more uncertain. Not long after, the witch ghosts broke through the defensive line held up by the human cultivators. A few witch ghosts crossed the defensive line and flew towards Qin Zhan. The dozen or so long-range cultivators hovering behind Qin Zhan fired the last of their ammunition, but they only managed to slow down the speed of a few attacking Wu ghosts. "You guys retreat first," Qin Zhan said in a deep voice. "See Qin, if you don't leave, we won't leave either," one of the young cultivators said with a resolute expression. "That's right, See Qin. We are not cowards who are afraid of death. Let's show these damned Wu ghosts the power of our Federation's cultivators." Another cultivator threw away the spirit light cannon in his hand, and a long sword appeared in his hand. He was ready to fight at any moment. "Retreat. This is an order," Qin Zhan said sternly. "See Qin," the dozen or so cultivators said in unison. "Leave. Do you want to disobey?" Qin Zhan's tone turned cold. He glanced sideways, and a cold glint flashed in the corner of his eyes. The killing intent around him continued to rise. The dozen or so cultivators leaned back at the same time. They had never seen See Qin like this before. His back was filled with a murderous aura, as if he was a killing god who walked out of hell. The 4 witch ghosts who passed through the defensive line had ferocious expressions. They looked at Qin Zhan and the dozen or so human cultivators as if they were looking at a group of chickens. This was a feast that they could easily capture. The witch ghosts knew very well that although these cultivators who attacked from afar were very powerful, once they got close to them, they were a group of weak scholars who could not even truss up a chicken. They were delicious and delicious. Bang! Qin Zhan's figure flashed and suddenly appeared beside the 4 witch ghosts. He fired a shot with his spirit magnetic light sniper rifle. Bang! Before the 4 witch ghosts could understand what was going on, they were all shot in the head. The 4 witch ghosts did not even dream that this would be the outcome, but they did not have the chance to think about it. Their upper bodies were all blown to pieces. This scene was seen by Sangji in the distance. He was instantly shocked and angry. He waved his hand, and some of the witch ghosts understood what he meant. The human cultivators' fighting strength had been greatly reduced, and they could not stop the witch ghosts at all. More than 20 witch ghosts flew toward Qin Zhan at the same time. Qin Zhan floated in the air. Facing more than 20 witch ghosts flying toward him, he did not show the slightest bit of fear. Instead, there was an incomparably determined look on his face. "Qian He, I'm sorry," Qin Zhan said softly with a smile. A gentle look flashed in his eyes. Qian He was his wife. Qin Zhan still had 2 spirit magnetic bullets in his hands. No matter how accurate his calculations were, it was impossible for him to kill more than 20 witch ghosts with 2 spirit magnetic bullets. Qin Zhan did not hesitate. His figure disappeared again, and when he reappeared, he fired 2 shots. 2 rays of light flashed past. 3 witch ghosts were shot in the head. 2 of them killed 2 birds with 1 stone. After running out of ammunition and food, Qin Zhan tossed the spirit magnetic light sniper rifle. The light sniper rifle turned into a ray of light and shot into the hands of an old human cultivator who had just retreated. He could die, but he could not lose the gun. If the Rakshasa state took it, he would be in trouble. If he could keep the gun, he would try his best to keep it. If he could not, the spirit magnetic light sniper rifle had a small self-destruct spirit formation, and it would explode directly. Moreover, this small spirit formation did not need to be triggered by a human cultivator. As long as it was contaminated by the aura of death, it would immediately explode. After killing 3 witch ghosts, the other witch ghosts who were charging toward him were enraged, and their speed suddenly increased. "Catch him. He's a high-ranking human cultivator general. Whoever catches him will be heavily rewarded," Sangji roared from behind. Hearing this, the shaman ghosts let out a roar. 2 of the ox-head shaman ghosts took the lead and let out ferocious roars. "Qin Zhan, it's dangerous," a human cultivator who had retreated into the protective shield shouted. Qin Zhan reached out his hand and a long sword appeared in his hand. It was called Zhan Lu. A mid-stage Jin Dan cultivator was not a match for the witch ghosts, but this Zhan Lu sword was made by the best artifact forging master in the Federation over 10 years. It was a superior grade heavenly mystic true treasure. Not even a soul formation grand cultivator would have such a high-grade Dharma treasure. There were less than 10 such treasures in the entire Federation. Li Daocheng's Tsang Ink was only a low-grade heavenly mystic true treasure. It was even a bit weaker and could only be called a heavenly mystic true treasure. Qin Zhan waved gently. Whoosh. It was a sword aura that was not solid. It did not seem to be very powerful. The 2 cow-headed witch ghosts smiled ferociously and swung their maces, trying to wake up the arrogant mid-stage Jin Dan cultivator in front of them. The witch ghosts were equivalent to Yuanian cultivators. How could a mere Jin Dan cultivator have the courage to wave his sword at us? Die! One of the ox-head witch ghosts roared, but his voice stopped abruptly. The maces in his hands were cut in half by the sword aura, and he was cut in half at the waist. His companion was also cut in half. This kind of injury should not be fatal to the witch ghosts, but the spirit chi contained in the sword aura surged into their bodies like a flood breaking through a dam. Bam bam! The 2 cow-headed witch ghosts turned into a rain of black blood and disappeared in the air. The witch ghosts that were rushing up from behind suddenly became serious. The ones at the front were so scared that they suddenly stopped and the witch ghosts behind them crashed into them. Qin Zhan looked at the frightened Wu ghosts, and a disdainful smile appeared on his dignified face. "Are you here to die? Ha!" Qin Zhan swung his sword and rushed into the group of witch ghosts. The Zhan Lu sword swayed lightly, as if it were an ancient sword dance. However, every time he swung his sword, a witch ghost would explode in the light. In just a few breaths of time, more than 20 witch ghosts were all killed. Not a single one was left. The human cultivators inside the protective barrier were delighted. Even they did not know that Qin Zhan had such a powerful trump card. Perhaps he could block it this time. At this moment, a loud boom came from the distance. A white figure fell from the sky at high speed. Boom! She smashed into the demon-subduing city, causing rocks to fly everywhere and creating a huge crater. The white figure was Goddess Hong Yang, who was fighting with Yurimai. Cough cough, after the dust settled, Fairy Hong Yang stood solemnly in the pit. She coughed violently and her beautiful face was covered in dust. Not only did it not cover up her exquisite features, it even added a hint of weakness and charm to her. Chapter 457. Goddess Hong Yang had been pushed back. On the surface, it looked like a small defeat, but it was a heavy blow to the morale of the human cultivators. They were already at a disadvantage. Apart from the deep hatred in their hearts, they were able to fight until now because of the support of a powerful being like Goddess Hong Yang. Every combat cultivator felt that perhaps they could win, and that they would not die for nothing. Goddess Hong Yang would definitely be able to turn the tide and resolve this crisis. In the past month, Goddess Hong Yang had saved the almost defeated self-cultivator army several times. All the self-cultivator army in the northwest stronghold had already regarded Goddess Hong Yang as their spiritual pillar. As long as she was there, this stronghold would not be broken. Goddess Hong Yang was like a divine light protecting this stronghold. But now, this divine light had been broken. The self-cultivator army's faith was mercilessly shattered at this moment. Their hope of victory was completely shattered at this moment. Humans lived with a single breath. When this breath was gone, they would immediately die. The Wu Gui army's morale soared. In an instant, they defeated the self-cultivator army that was on the verge of collapse. The remaining 300 or so self-cultivators scattered in all directions. The Wu Gui army, which had just over 100 casualties, still had 200 people. They charged towards the northwest stronghold from all directions in the void. Qin Zhan floated alone in the void above the protective barrier. He raised his head and looked at the vast Wu Gui army that was charging towards him. Although his expression was serious, there was no fear. From the moment he joined the army, he had already disregarded life and death. The only thing he was worried about was his wife, who was lying in a hospital in a coma for 3 years. Qianhe, didn't you say that the unparalleled hero in your heart was facing thousands of netherworld ghost army without moving? With a sword in hand, with a smile on his face, no matter how much you cried and howled, he was still fearless? Qianhe, does that mean I've done it now? Qin Zhan muttered to himself. His expression was calm and composed. Great official Qin, what are you muttering to yourself for? You're so crazy. Are you thinking of me? Just as Qin Zhan was feeling sentimental, Yu Yan's sweet voice came from the void beside him. The image of a peerless hero had been shattered by this woman. If it were any other time, Qin Zhan would definitely respond coldly. However, at this moment, he smiled helplessly and glanced at Yu Yan. This woman really didn't care even if the sky fell down. She was still going to act coquettishly. Commander Yu, let's retreat. I'll handle this, Qin Zhan said calmly. Scram, I don't need you to come. Yu Yan's expression instantly changed. She no longer looked like a delicate girl. Well, it's up to you. Qin Zhan smiled. Yu Yan didn't reply. She looked up at the sky, and a faint smile appeared on her beautiful and delicate face. However, that smile was no longer as enchanting and charming as before. Instead, it was filled with determination. Yu Yan was not afraid of death. Because her parents had died at the hands of dark ghosts, she joined the army to take revenge. She would kill as many as she could. Dad, Mom, I'll come to see you today. However, before that, I want to earn 2 more lives for you. Hee, Yu Yan muttered in a voice that only she could hear. In the end, she laughed out loud. Whoosh. A ray of light flew over. The injured goddess Hong Yang instantly arrived. The three most important people of the Northwest stronghold floated in a row. The scattered human cultivators rushed towards them with all their might. However, how could their speed be faster than the Wu ghosts? More than 200 Wu ghosts poured down like a waterfall and swallowed the three. Boom, 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 in an instant. Sword light shot out from the edge of the protective barrier. The Wu ghosts at the front were instantly drowned. However, the Wu ghosts behind them were not afraid of death at all. As long as the Wu cores of the Wu ghosts were not destroyed, they could be reborn in the Wu blood pool. Even if the Wu cores were shattered, if they were recognized by ancestor Wu Ho, they could still be reborn. After being reborn, they would obtain even more power. Therefore, dying in battle meant that they would be reborn. Even if the possibility was extremely small, they would not hesitate. However, if they dared to escape, they would suffer a fate worse than death. The laws of the Rakshasa state were even more terrifying than hell. Pooh! Yu Yen spat out a mouthful of blood. She suffered a heavy blow from the back. She waved her hand and threw out a level 13 sword talisman to kill the Wu ghost that attacked her from behind. Dong! Another Wu ghost slapped Yu Yan's shoulder. Crack! Yu Yan's left shoulder was completely shattered. The Wu ghost opened its mouth and was about to bite off Yu Yan's head. The latter watched as the bloody mask came down on her. She was so heavily injured that she did not have the strength to dodge. Whoosh! A sword light flashed past. Before the Wu ghost could bite down, its head was split open. Its head was separated from its body. Then, it exploded into black rain and disappeared into the void. Qin Zhan appeared beside Yu Yen. The latter smiled weakly. Thank you, Lord Qin. Qin Zhan also smiled. You're welcome. Take it. Qin Zhan quickly handed Yu Yen a few talismans. They were all level 13 talismans. There were fire talismans, ice talismans, explosion talismans, thunder talismans, and wind talismans. There were all kinds of talismans. Yu Yen hesitated and did not take them. Qin Zhan swung his sword a few times and forced the Wu ghosts back. Take them. I have the Zhan Lu sword. Yu Yen gritted her teeth and took all the talismans. She did not have much strength left to fight. These talismans could help her kill a few more Wu ghosts. Although Goddess Hong Yang was heavily injured, she was an existence that was second only to a soul formation grand cultivator. It was more than enough to deal with the Wu ghost. However, every time Goddess Hong Yang launched an attack, the injuries in her body would worsen. Sanji Yi, who was watching the battle from a distance, showed extreme impatience on his ugly face. A bunch of good-for-nothings. With that said, Sanji Yi flew up from the Black Throne and joined the battle. Intercourse, who had not moved, twitched his mouth and followed reluctantly. He stared at the Zhan Lu sword in Qin Zhan's hand with a pair of dark red eyes. A Dharma treasure of this level was hard to come by. If he could get his hands on it and bring it back to the Rakshasa state, Wu Ho would definitely reward him handsomely. He might even be able to recover his original level. Intercourse probably would not have made a move if the Zhan Lu sword did not appear. Below the rolling black clouds in the sky, Urumai should have followed up with another attack after defeating Goddess Hong Yang. However, just as he was about to attack, a terrifying telekinetic power flashed past. At that moment, Urumai felt as if all the hell blood in his body had been frozen. His entire body stiffened, and his wizard core trembled slightly. He could not help but feel fear. It was like the wizard ancestor or a soul formation grand cultivator. This telekinetic power was fleeting. Urumai did not catch any clues at all. He could not even sense where the telekinetic power came from. The nervousness made Urumai spread his death will to search for traces of that telekinetic power. However, he could not find anything. This is strange. Is it my imagination? Urumai was confused. At this moment, Sanji Yi had already rushed into the battle. Goddess Hong Yang, who had been able to hold on, was forced to retreat after Sanji's appearance. Sanji's soul-devouring spear had been taken away, so she could only use her backup soul-refining blade. It was one level lower, but it was still very powerful with the help of the hellfire. There were dozens of burn marks all over Fairy Hongyang's body. Her retro-white Taoist robe was in tatters. It could no longer be called a robe. The parts that were exposed had scars and burn marks. However, most of her snow-white skin was exposed, revealing her beauty. However, at this moment, Goddess Hongyang did not care about her image at all. She used all her strength to control the Hongyang flying sword to block Sanji's attacks again and again. On the other side, Qin Zhan had turned into a god of war and was killing the Wu ghosts. Wherever the Zhan Lu sword went, there would be no ghosts left. In just a short while, more than 20 Wu ghosts had been killed by the Zhan Lu sword and disappeared into the void. Even their wizard cores were not preserved. Yu Yan circled around Qin Zhan. When a witch ghost launched a sneak attack, she would release a spirit talisman to defeat it. The two of them worked together and the entire Wu ghost army was in chaos. Together with the cultivators who had returned to join the battle, the situation seemed to be in the favor of the human cultivators. The Zhan Lu sword. After this battle, it would definitely be famous in both worlds. This was the first time Qin Zhan had taken out the Zhan Lu sword. This was his biggest trump card, and he did not want to use it. Just as everyone saw a glimmer of hope, a surge of death aura suddenly pressed down on them. Qin Zhan was shocked, and Yu Yan did not even have time to react. Bang! Qin Zhan's chest suffered a heavy blow, and his entire body flew backward like a cannonball. Yu Yan looked around in shock, but there was no one there. Dong! Yu Yan's lower abdomen was in pain, and she flew backward as well. Qin Zhan and Yu Yan had no idea who had attacked them. Qin Zhan flew backward for a few hundred meters before he stopped. There was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth, and the blood in his body was in turmoil. He had suffered severe internal injuries in just one attack. The hand holding the Zhan Lu sword trembled slightly, and the death aura swept over him again. Qin Zhan could not pinpoint the exact location of this death aura with his naked eye or his telekinesis. In his panic, he could only swing his sword wildly. Bang! Qin Zhan's back suffered a heavy blow, and he crashed to the ground. Boom! Qin Zhan crashed into the ground, creating a deep pit. There were many fractures on his body, but he endured the pain and stubbornly stood up without a sound. Yu Yan was dumbfounded. What the hell? However, just as she revealed a shocked expression, her neck was tightly gripped by an invisible hand. A handsome witch ghost gradually appeared. It was the intercourse who had joined the battle. The treasure that made the intercourse disappear was the Grand Wizard's night enchantment cloak that Wu Ho's cherry blossom gauze had given him. Facing a witch ghost, Yu Yan did not have much strength to resist. Now that her neck was gripped, the death aura kept entering her body, and her body went limp. Other than the anger in her eyes, she could only let the intercourse do whatever he wanted. The intercourse grabbed Yu Yan's neck and slowly landed in front of Qin Zhan. He only wanted Wu Ho to allow him to soak in the witch blood pool in the Witch Valley. At that time, intercourse would be able to recover his past strength. Ha ha! Intercourse became happier the more he thought about it. He raised his head and laughed. Then, he looked at Qin Zhan with a sympathetic expression. Qin Zhan, as a famous general, I didn't expect you to be such a soft-hearted person. Intercourse was halfway through his sentence when he felt a sharp pain in his hand that was holding the clear sable sword. A terrifying wave of spirit chi suddenly entered his body from the sword. Intercourse was shocked. This terrifying wave of spirit chi made him feel like he was about to die. He instinctively threw the sword away. Intercourse was instantly covered by the night demon cloak, and he disappeared. Qin Zhan's face revealed a look of regret. He actually didn't succeed. The clear sable sword was a high-grade heavenly mystic true treasure. How could it not have a sword spirit? However, Qin Zhan's cultivation was too low. He could not activate the sword spirit. In Qin Zhan's hands, the clear sable sword could not even unleash 1/1000th of its power. However, all spiritual items would instinctively resist the death aura. Sword spirits were the same. Intercourse wanted the clear sable sword. Even if he did not use Yu Yan as a threat, Qin Zhan would still give it to him. With Wu Gui's strength, he would not be able to suppress the clear sable sword's sword spirit. Instead, he would be devoured. If Wu Gui did not have a powerful magic treasure that could resist the clear sable sword spirit, he would have been devoured by the sword spirit. Qin Zhan stretched out his hand regretfully. The clear sable sword flew back and landed in his hand. You dared to trick me. Somewhere in the dark void, Xiang Yu's enraged voice echoed out. Just now, he had nearly pissed himself in fright. If it was not for the night demon cloak, Intercourse would have died. When Intercourse appeared again, he was standing behind Qin Zhan. The latter did not hesitate and swung his sword. Qin Zhan was not Intercourse's match even if he was in his peak condition. Moreover, he was heavily injured. Even with the clear sable sword in his hand, he could not make up for the huge difference in strength. Bang! Intercourse simply waved his hand. Qin Zhan flew backward like a kite with a broken string. He crashed heavily into a broken wall. Qin Zhan spat out a mouthful of blood. Half of his face was covered in blood. He wanted to stand up, but he could not. Yu Yan was raised in the air by Intercourse. She watched as Qin Zhan, the Federation's most outstanding commander, was beaten up. She closed her eyes and could not bear to watch. A teardrop fell from the corner of Yu Yan's eye. She muttered in her heart, "Goodbye, my comrades." Yu Yan's body suddenly lit up. Qin Zhan's expression changed. He raised his head and looked at Yu Yan. He cried out, "Idiot, don't." Self-destruction was a skill that every cultivator naturally knew. However, this was a skill that no one wanted to use. Once used, one would completely disappear into nothingness. Even one's soul would completely disappear and cease to exist. The humans of the spiritual realm, regardless of whether they were cultivators or mortals, had always believed in reincarnation. After all living things died, there would be a mysterious force that would drive them to become another kind of existence. Death referred to the disappearance of the physical body, but the soul would still exist. Death was not scary. To a certain extent, it was a form of rebirth. What was scary was disappearing. Disappearing forever into nothingness. The so-called disappearing meant that the soul would scatter. This was the true meaning of death. And the result of self-destruction was disappearing. Between heaven and earth, there would no longer be any imprints of you, and there would no longer be any reincarnation. Qin Zhan's heart was filled with desolation. The remaining cultivators of the vanguard regiment who were still fighting desperately in the air saw Yu Yan's state below. All of their hearts tightened. "Commander!" Almost everyone let out a sorrowful cry at the same time. The unified cry, dull and sorrowful, reverberated in the air. Every single cultivator was filled with despair. Yuanying's peak goddess Hong Yang was defeated. Qin Seat, who possessed the heavenly profound true treasure, was defeated. Now, their most respected commander was going to self-destruct. The last bit of pride of the Northwest Vanguard Regiment's soldiers was shattered by the cruel reality. Everyone's fighting spirit fell to the lowest point. Despair spread across everyone's faces. Want to self-destruct? Humph, this shaman did not allow you to die. Do you think you can die? Intercourse looked at Yu Yan's body that was heating up and said coldly. Intercourse's arm emitted a death aura and instantly invaded Yu Yan's body. In the blink of an eye, the light and heat on Yu Yan's body disappeared. His entire body was entangled by the death aura, and his body was as cold as a dead person's. Yu Yan felt that his body was no longer his own. Just at this time, a ray of light shot over. Intercourse's pupils suddenly constricted, and the night demon cloak flickered with a thought. Whoosh! Intercourse disappeared. The ray of light passed through Intercourse's original position, but did not touch anything. Hong Yang's flying sword was reflected back, and landed in Goddess Hong Yang's hands. Seeing the danger, Goddess Hong Yang used the last of her strength to block Sanji Yi, and tried to save Yu Yen. Unfortunately, she did not succeed. Goddess Hong Yang's beautiful face flashed with loneliness. Sanji Yi swooped down from the sky, and the broadsword in his hand slashed down. He knocked away the Hong Yang flying sword floating beside Goddess Hong Yang, and reached out to grab Goddess Hong Yang. He wanted to capture a nascent soul cultivator alive. Fairy Hong Yang bit down hard on her lower lip as she extended her slender hands to meet Sanji Yi's huge hand. Bang! There was a muffled sound. With Goddess Hong Yang and Sanji Yi as the center, a shockwave spread out. The northwest area of Demon Subduing City, which was already broken, suffered another heavy blow. All the tall buildings collapsed, and the shockwave cut off the waste of more than 10 kilometers. Yuanying, a peak cultivator, and the Grand Wizard's simple attack, exploded with such a shocking destructive power. If the collision between Goddess Hong Yang and Uramai in the void just now had happened on the ground, the entire Demon Subduing City would have ceased to exist. Demon Subduing City was the largest city on 13 Specter, and its area was astonishingly large. Almost all the people from the Federation who came to 13 Specter were gathered here, and the other cities and towns were very small. Demon Subduing City's urban cluster was 200 kilometers in size, but it was not like the metropolises on the Federation's cultivation planets, where there were many tall buildings. The highest floor here was only about 50 floors, and there were very few of them. At this time, half of the buildings in the northwest area of Demon Subduing City had collapsed, and it was a mess. At the center of the ruins, Goddess Hong Yang's feet were cracked, and the cracks spread out for more than a kilometer. The place where she stood sank deeply, and a pair of slender hands firmly resisted Sanji's huge claw. The pair of translucent little hands were like toothpicks in front of the giant claw. However, they contained an unimaginable amount of energy and forcibly blocked the giant claw. Goddess Hong Yang spat out a large mouthful of blood. "Beauty, don't force yourself. Come back to the Hades with this Grand Wizard and become this Grand Wizard's wizard puppet. In Desang County, you will be second only to one person and above thousands. This Grand Wizard can promise you that he will keep all of your consciousness. How about it?" Sanji Yi laughed sinisterly. "Bah!" Goddess Hong Yang spat out a mouthful of blood. Chapter 459. Sanji, whose face was covered in blood, was furious. With a flip of his hand, he grabbed both of Fairy Hong Yang's hands and swung his other hand to slap her. Slap! There was a crisp sound. Half of Goddess Hong Yang's face suddenly turned red and swollen. Yuanying, a peak great cultivator, was slapped in public. The combat cultivators in the air, who were already in low spirits, completely lost their fighting spirit. They had lost this battle after all. They had done everything they could. A few combat cultivators cried silently. Demon Subduing City was finished. The Rakshasa state would completely capture 13 Specter and kill all the human cultivators. Then, they could use 13 Specter as a springboard to launch a general attack on the Shenghua Federation. It would not be long before the Federation would be plunged into misery and suffering. The spiritual energy of the depressed combat cultivators continued to weaken as the violent death aura devoured them bit by bit. The spiritual energy above the northwest stronghold was almost completely melted, and the death aura soared into the sky. Goddess Hong Yang, who had been slapped, gritted her teeth. A light flashed in her hand, and 2 silver needles flew out from her palm. Rainbow flying needles. This was Goddess Hong Yang's life-saving hidden weapon. Whoosh! It was as fast as lightning. Sanguir was a senior magus, but he was still caught unprepared by the attack from such a close distance. However, Goddess Hong Yang's injuries were too serious, and the power of the rainbow flying needles was greatly reduced. One of them pierced through Sanji's shoulder, while the other was bitten by Sanji. Other than a few broken teeth, Sanji managed to block the rainbow flying needles. Goddess Hong Yang's face was lonely as she sighed faintly. Demon subduing city, which had stood in 13 Specter for hundreds of years. Today her luck was over. However, Goddess Hong Yang did not give up. Suddenly, the spiritual energy around her body surged, and an astonishing aura erupted. Sanji, who was close to her, was shocked. He stared at Goddess Hong Yang, who had erupted with a huge aura, and revealed a look of horror. This spiritual energy made Sanguine feel fear. Not far away, Qin Zhan struggled to stand up. He wanted to say something, but no sound came out. His injuries were too serious. When the combat cultivators in the air saw this scene, they didn't feel happy, but rather sad. Goddess Hong Yang was burning Yuanying's spirit blood, which would severely damage his foundation. The best outcome would be that his cultivation would never be able to advance again. In the worst-case scenario, their cultivation would plummet and they would become crippled. It was a fate worse than death. While the soldiers were grieving, Goddess Hong Yang looked coldly at Sanji in front of her. She opened her slender hands slightly. Sanji could not hold on to it no matter how hard he tried. He could only watch helplessly as the pair of delicate hands broke free. But Goddess Hong Yang did not make any move, but a crisp sound was heard. Sanji's ferocious and ugly face was slapped hard. His entire body fell to the ground, his face stuck to the hard scorched ground. He slid for hundreds of meters before coming to a stop, forming a deep gully on the ground. When Sanji got up, half of his face was badly mutilated, revealing the white bones inside. His originally ferocious face became even more terrifying and ugly. Damn it, B*TSH, you're courting death. Sanji was furious. A wave of materialized death aura surged around him, spiraling into a flood dragon of Hades. Without the soul-devouring spear, Sanji could still use this move, but its power would not be as great as the soul-devouring spear's transformation. The flood dragon of Hades roared and rushed toward Goddess Hong Yang. Goddess Hong Yang, who was burning Yuanying's spirit blood, smiled contemptuously. At this moment, her strength was even stronger than when she was in her peak state. How could a mere grand wizard's dark art be worthy of her attention? The rainbow flying sword shot out rapidly. With a boom, the flood dragon of Hades was annihilated by the rainbow flying sword without causing much of a commotion. Sanji was shocked. He spat on the ground. These damned human cultivators, why aren't they afraid of death? They're willing to burn Yuanying's spirit blood to continue fighting. How troublesome. A perfectly good grand wizard's spirit blood is damaged just like that. Damn it. Goddess Hong Yang was just about to continue attacking Sanji when she suddenly felt something behind her back. Without thinking, the rainbow flying sword immediately turned into a streak of light and shot behind her. Urumai, who had been hovering in the air, gave up on searching for the source of telekinesis. Seeing the goddess Hong Yang's final radiance, he threw the soul-devouring spear in his hand with all his might. It turned into a streak of black light and shot toward the ground. The soul-devouring spear was entwined with a trace of nether lightning. Hundreds of netherworld ghosts poured out from the spear. When they collided with the streak of light, the soul-devouring spear and the rainbow flying sword clashed. The streak of light on the rainbow flying sword instantly dimmed. The remaining light was quickly devoured by the hundreds of netherworld ghosts. The rainbow flying sword and the soul-devouring spear fell to the ground together. What? Goddess Hong Yang was shocked. Although the rainbow flying sword had struck the soul-devouring spear down, the netherworld ghosts did not disappear. They continued to fly toward Goddess Hong Yang. Ear-piercing ghostly wails could be heard. The hundreds of netherworld ghosts all penetrated Goddess Hong Yang's body and flew out from behind her. After flying out, these netherworld ghosts gradually disappeared into the void. Goddess Hong Yang's aura continued to weaken. The berserk aura of burning Yuanying spirit blood was quickly dissipated. When all the netherworld ghosts penetrated Goddess Hong Yang's body, she no longer had any aura. She stood there helplessly like a mortal girl. A bleak smile appeared on her exquisite and beautiful face. Now she could not even self-detonate. Urumai landed in front of Goddess Hong Yang. His massive body was more than 3 meters tall. He looked like a Rakshasa from hell. The latter was petite and weak. She was less than 1.7 meters tall. When she stood next to Urumai, she was even smaller than a child. Your Goddess Hong Yang? Yuanying, a pinnacle great cultivator? TSK, is there really no one in the Shenghua Federation? You're only SOSO. Urumai sneered. As he spoke, Urumai's gaze toward Goddess Hong Yang became a little strange. The greed in his eyes was becoming more and more obvious. Fairy Hong Yang, who had completely lost her ability to resist, no longer had any power to protect herself. She was completely exposed to the air. Urumai's gaze penetrated Yuanying's body inside Goddess Hong Yang's body. It's a pure Yin body, a primary soul ghost infant. I didn't expect this. I really didn't expect that there would be a human cultivator who could cultivate a part of her soul into a Yuanying. Hong Yang, aren't you a great tonic? A mortal soul Lingji. Urumai laughed. When Intercourse and Senji heard this, greed appeared on their faces. This kind of human female cultivator was extremely rare. Once they encountered one, it would be a great opportunity for the witch ghost. After absorbing the pure Yin energy, she would also absorb the primary soul ghost infant. The witch ghost could become a grand wizard ghost. An ordinary grand wizard ghost could become a high-level grand wizard ghost. It was almost on par with the witch ancestor's blood pool. To Hades, this kind of human female cultivator was a supreme-grade treasure. It was hard to find one in 100 years. Everyone has a share. Urumai, don't tell me you want to take it all for yourself. Intercourse was the first to speak. Urumai, if the 3 of us absorb a part each, it'll be enough to raise our strength by a lot. Senji said in a low voice. Among human cultivators, killing others to steal treasures was a common occurrence. It was the same among Hades' ghosts. Once great benefits were involved, the ugliest side of a human would be revealed without reservation, be it the human heart or the nature of a ghost. Urumai naturally wanted to take it all for himself. However, when facing Intercourse and Senji, the 2 ghost generals of Hades, he was not afraid of their strength, but the power behind them. Just like the Federation, the Rakshasa state also had different factions and factions. Intercourse and Senji both belonged to Wu Ho's faction. Wu Ho was even favored by Wu Ho. She even gave him a grand wizard treasure so casually. It was enough to show her trust in him. With Urumai's strength, it would not be difficult for him to get rid of Intercourse and Senji. However, there was no such thing as an impenetrable wall in the world. Once Wu Ho found out about this, what awaited Urumai would be Wu Ho's endless fury. In fact, the cherry blossom gauze did not care about Intercourse and Senji's life and death. They were just 2 lackeys to Wu Ho. However, Wu Ho would never allow anyone to challenge her authority. She would not allow anyone to kill her dogs. If anyone dared to kill them, what awaited them would be the cruelest revenge. No matter how strong Urumai was, he did not dare to disobey the cherry blossom gauze, Wu Ho. She was one of the 2 strongest people in the Rakshasa state. Although there were rumors that the cherry blossom gauze's strength had greatly decreased and was not as terrifying as before, even if the rumors were true, Urumai did not dare to challenge the cherry blossom gauze's authority. After some consideration, he realized that this was not a difficult choice. Urumai put away his unwilling expression and tried his best to appear as friendly as possible. We are all good brothers. Of course, we should share good things together. Protector, the female cultivator in your hands has a very special physique. Although she can't be compared to this goddess Hong Yang, we should not waste her. Urumai had long noticed that Yu Yan's spirit vein contained yin energy. Jin Dan was a golden cold core. Xian heaven spirit vein and ice spirit vein. It was just that Yu Yan specialized in the body refinement realm and did not display her full potential. Otherwise, she would be at least a Yuanying early-stage cultivator by now. The three high-ranking generals of the Rakshasa state spoke casually. However, the meaning behind their words aroused endless anger in every human cultivator who heard them. They were going to defile two outstanding human female cultivators, commonly known as gang rape. After reaching an agreement, the three Grand Wizard placed the two women together as if there was no one else around. They raised a black barrier and were about to attack. The human cultivators were enraged. Even if they had no chance of winning, they could not just watch two outstanding female cultivators be defiled by three witch ghosts. The remaining 200 or so soldiers charged down without caring about anything. Among them, more than 10 Yuanying cultivators charged at the front. They were not only fighting for their country, but also for the dignity of their race. The shameless beings of the Hades were trampling on the bottom line in every soldier's heart. If they ignored this, what kind of people were they? However, how could the witch ghost army allow them to succeed? They quickly intercepted them, and most of the combat cultivators were stopped. Only 20 combat cultivators with higher cultivations and a few Yuanying cultivators charged over. However, before they could get close, Urumai casually waved his hand and sent everyone flying. The power of the Grand Wizard was not something they could resist. Qin Zhan used the last of his strength to throw out the clear sable sword. However, he could not even break through the black barrier. At this moment, Yu Yan and goddess Hong Yang, who were lying inside the black barrier, had pale faces. The two women knew what was going to happen next. Facing such a situation, they were willing to die. Urumai tore off his clothes and grabbed goddess Hong Yang's collar. With a light tug, the already tattered clothes were ripped off, revealing her underwear. Goddess Hong Yang's uninjured skin was still white and smooth. The wounds on her body did not destroy her beauty. Instead, they stimulated the beastly desires of the three witch ghosts. TSK, who would have thought that a human female cultivator would be comparable to a Rakshasa female cultivator from the Rakshasa state. Urumai had a perverted expression as he admired goddess Hong Yang's body. Rip. On the other side, Yu Yan's clothes were also ripped off, revealing her white body. Intercourse, when they saw her jade-like skin, they groaned. In reality, at the level of witch ghosts, seeing a human female cultivator would stimulate their most primal desires, and they would want to mate with her. Any powerful female creature could become the target of the Wu Gui. After obtaining the Wu Gui's physical body, this body went through the ghost body, half underworld body, and finally the Wu Gui's physical body. It had endless desires. If it weren't for the fact that the Rakshasa state witches were as beautiful as flowers and had similar desires, the witch ghosts of the Rakshasa state would have become a group of thirsty beasts. Yu Yan was unable to move. Tears flowed out from the corners of her eyes. She used all her strength to shout, "Kill me! Kill me! Beauty, how can I bear to kill you?" Ha! Intercourse laughed. Yu Yan suddenly raised her arm. A silver light shot out from her hand and pierced towards her own heart. This was her last bit of strength. Intercourse easily grabbed Yu Yan's wrist. "It's not that easy to die," Intercourse gloomily said. Yu Yan's face was ashen, and the light in her beautiful eyes dimmed instantly. There was only despair. She had never wished for herself to die as soon as possible. Qin Zhan knelt on the ground and crawled towards the black barrier bit by bit. His hands were covered in blood. He still wanted to save Yu Yen and goddess Hong Yang, even though he had no strength left. His bloodshot eyes stared at the three witch ghosts who were committing atrocities in the Black Barrier. Qin Zhan had never felt so useless before. The battle in the air gradually became a one-sided massacre. There were only 100 or so combat cultivators left in the vanguard group, as well as a dozen or so Yuanian cultivators. The rest had all died. Ning Xiujie held Xiao Ying and stood back to back with Ling Fei. They were surrounded by 5 witch ghosts. They had used up all their talismans and spiritual thunder. Their dharma robes were also destroyed, and their weapons were only left with a 3-inch dagger. These 3 people and Li Daochong had never joined again on planet tongue pulling. Ning Xiujie directly returned to her cultivation planet. Xiao Ying and Ling Fei wanted to be apprenticed to Li Daochong, but they were rejected. They were only given a 9-split saber technique, and said that they would see each other again in half a year. The 2 of them did not have many resources. Fortunately, Tsing Jiao had always supported them, allowing them to cultivate. 2 months later, the 2 women felt that it was not a good idea to be so capable. Their progress was very slow, so they contacted Ding Fuguei and wanted to join the army. Ding Fuguei naturally agreed, but with their cultivation, they could not become a regular army. They could only be temporary reserve. Ding Fuguei later let the 2 women enter the vanguard group through his relationship with Yu Yen. In the vanguard group, they met Ning Xiujie, who had also joined the army after failing the exam. At this moment, 5 witch ghosts attacked at the same time. Ning Xiujie and Ling Fei no longer had the ability to dodge. They could only watch as the other party attacked. Xiao Ying was seriously injured. Her spine was broken and she could not move. "Master, your disciple is useless," Xiao Ying murmured. "How can my disciple be useless?" A faint voice came from the void, and a Tsang ink-colored light flashed past. The 5 witch ghosts were all slashed into pieces and exploded into black rain. Chapter 460. He killed 5 Wu ghosts with 1 slash. Ning Xiujie and Ling Fei were dumbfounded. What a terrifying power! Xiao Ying, who couldn't move, was shocked, but she said softly, 9-split saber art. Its master. Ling Fei also reacted. That round of Tsang Ink's saber light just now was the first layer of 9-split saber art, crushing stones and splitting earth. Li Daochong didn't teach them anything. The only thing he left was a set of incomplete saber technique. Ling Fei and Xiao Ying's cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds in the past few months. In addition to relying on Tsing Jiao's support, their biggest reliance was this set of saber technique. On the surface, it seemed to be a set of high-level saber technique. In fact, after cultivating, Xiao Ying and Ling Fei both found that this set of saber techniques also contained a mental cultivation method. They had studied this set of saber techniques and even flipped through many ancient books. They did find some allusions to this set of saber technique. In addition, there was an explanation of the first layer of 9-split saber art in an ancient book. However, after the 2 women read it, they found that the 9-split saber art in the book was different from their own cultivation method. The saber techniques Li Daochong gave them were much more profound and mysterious. After a lot of changes, it was easier to cultivate. After practicing a set of saber techniques, one's mental power would increase a little. After cultivating this set of saber techniques, one didn't need other mental cultivation methods at all. The incantation of the saber techniques itself was a mental cultivation method. If one followed it and meditated, the effect would be much more powerful than those common mental cultivation method. In just a few short months, Xiao Ying and Ling Fei, who had average talent and believed that they would be able to reach foundation establishment in 10 years, had already reached foundation establishment. Unexpectedly, they succeeded in building their foundation in a few months and became a foundation establishment cultivator. For them, this was unimaginable. This also made them more determined to follow Li Daochong. Any saber technique he threw out could let them catch up with the footsteps of many geniuses. If this set of cultivation method was complete, then it would be terrible. Moreover, Li Daochong had more than just this set of cultivation method. They had experienced so many things with Li Daochong on tongue-pulling planet, so how could they not see the wonders of Li Daochong? Being able to meet such a godly person was the greatest opportunity in his life. If he missed this opportunity, he was afraid that he would never have the chance to meet such a person again in this lifetime. Therefore, the two girls decided to return to Li Daochong as soon as they were done with 13 Specter. They had already completed Li Daochong's initial request, which was to cultivate the first 2 layers of the 9 cracks saber art to perfection. With these 2 saber techniques, Xiao Ying and Ling Fei were ranked at the top among the combat cultivators of the Northwest Vanguard. Even Ning Xiujie would fall behind when sparring with them. It was also because of their powerful strength that the 2 women were able to hold on until now. If they were weaker, they would have died long ago. Whoosh! A green shadow flashed over. Ning Xiujie, Ling Fei, and Xiao Ying stared blankly at Li Daochong, who had arrived in the blink of an eye, in a daze. They were all stunned. What surprised them was not Li Daochong's sudden appearance, but the undetectable aura on Li Daochong's body. It had only been a few months since they parted ways on tongue-pulling planet. Not only did the gap between them and Li Daochong not shrink, but it grew even larger. Li Daochong looked down and frowned slightly. He could sense the disappearing auras of human cultivators from far away. He knew that a great battle had broken out. Among these auras, there were at least 5 auras that Li Daochong was very familiar with. Li Daochong, who had originally been with the main group, did not even say a word before he tore through the air like a sharp arrow. He flew all the way. He only hoped that his speed could be faster, faster, faster. Every once in a while, several auras would disappear. Li Daochong was burning with anxiety, afraid that the auras he was familiar with would disappear. Yu Yan and Qin Zhan had helped him. Ning Xiujie, Xiao Ying, and Ling Fei had feelings for him. Li Daochong did not want these people to be lost. When Xiao Ying's aura weakened, the anger in Li Daochong's heart suddenly rose. He only hated that he could not teleport, otherwise he would immediately tear open space and appear on the battlefield. Fortunately, after Xiao Ying's aura weakened, it stabilized and did not disappear. Li Daochong rushed all the way, but his aura was completely hidden in his body. No one noticed his approach. Li Daochong only appeared in front of Ning Xiujie and the other 2 for a second. Without even looking at them, he turned into a green light and shot to the ground. At this moment, the 2 Grand Wizard, Intercourse and Uramai, greedily stretched out their evil hands, wanting to tear off the last bit of undergarments on Yu Yan and Goddess Hong Yang. Yu Yan failed to commit suicide. After being blocked by Intercourse, she continued to scream, kill me quickly." Intercourse said with a lustful face, "Beauty, you won't think like this in a while. This wizard will make you forget all your troubles and experience pleasure that you have never experienced in your life." "Ha!" Intercourse said as he reached out to grab Yu Yan's last black laced underwear. Her snow-white slender thighs were as smooth as jade. Anyone who saw them would have infinite fantasies. Yu Yan opened her beautiful eyes in despair. Tears kept flowing out. She had never been as helpless and desperate as she was now. Death, at this moment, was the greatest relief. At this moment, death was better than living. Yu Yan's eyes were empty. She looked at the void, her heart was dead. A Tsang ink-colored brilliance suddenly appeared and swooped down. The Tsang ink-colored brilliance was reflected in Yu Yan's empty and desperate eyes. Bang! Intercourse's hand was less than 3 inches away from Yu Yan's skin. Suddenly, a fist hit him on the side of his face like a cannonball. Intercourse didn't have time to react at all. He flew out like a cannonball, smashing the black barrier into pieces. Sanguine and Urumai also didn't know what happened. How did intercourse suddenly fly out? When they reacted, they saw a young man in a green martial arts suit appear in front of them. Yu Yen, who had lost all hope in her heart, saw Li Daochong descend from the sky. Her heart trembled. She stared dumbfoundedly at Li Daochong, who sent intercourse flying with a punch. Since the last time they parted, this kid had made great progress again. Yu Yen looked at Li Daochong in astonishment. Her mind was blank. This guy couldn't be explained with common sense. Fairy Hongyang, who thought that she would die in the midst of endless humiliation and shame, had a deathly pale complexion. When she saw Li Daochong, she was surprised, doubtful, and puzzled. She was surprised because she didn't expect that a cultivator would rush to her rescue at this critical moment and even succeed. She was puzzled because this cultivator's aura was hard to grasp. She was puzzled because Goddess Hongyang didn't have the slightest impression of this cultivator. He didn't seem to be a cultivator. Quick, kill us! A thought flashed through Fairy Hongyang's mind. Her first reaction was to ask Li Daochong. There was no better way now. Goddess Hongyang only wanted to die and not be tainted by the underworld shaman. Being killed by her own kind was the best result now. Little Chong, kill us! When Yu Yen heard Goddess Hongyang's words, her delicate body trembled. She immediately understood Goddess Hongyang's meaning and followed. Yu Yen knew that Li Daochong had become stronger, but so what? No matter how strong he was, could he be stronger than two Grand Wizard? Even Goddess Hongyang was defeated. So what if Li Daochong came? Yu Yen smiled sadly. It was a fact that the northwest stronghold of the demon-subduing city had been captured, and there was still the Wu Gui army in the air. Li Daochong turned a deaf ear to the two women's words, as if he didn't hear them. Li Daochong looked at Sanji and Urumai faintly. His expression didn't show much emotion. This seemed to be his usual style, but the depths of his eyes were emitting a threatening gaze. Looking at Yu Yen and the other female cultivators' disheveled clothes, Li Daochong was really angry. Did you do this? Li Daochong said lightly. Urumai was inexplicably annoyed. Kid, if you want to live longer, scram. When Sanji saw the face of the person, his body suddenly trembled and he subconsciously took a step back. His eyes were full of fear, and he didn't dare to make a sound. Li Daochong suddenly waved his hand. Sanji was so scared that he raised his hands to protect his face, but nothing happened for a long time. He moved his hands away and saw a Tsang ink-colored long blade on Intercourse's shoulder in the distance. Li Daochong retracted his hand, and Intercourse was brought back by Tsang ink. Seeing Li Daochong, Intercourse couldn't hide his fear. Last time, he had suffered this young man's lightning strike in the old house on planet Crimson Sunday. Intercourse couldn't forget it for the rest of his life, and it had already formed a psychological shadow. The power of Yang lightning was too terrifying. In his opinion, there was no power more terrifying than Yang lightning in this world. At that time, Intercourse really thought that he would die. After luckily escaping, he almost became a cripple. If it weren't for Wu Ho's cherry blossom gauze finding him and throwing him into the blood pool, he wouldn't have been able to move for at least a year. Yu Yen and Goddess Hongyang looked at Intercourse, who was easily pierced by a long blade, in shock. They looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. At the same time, Li Daochong's move made Urumai, who had just said some harsh words, shrink his pupils slightly. Urumai was very clear about Intercourse's strength, but this young man in front of him had subdued him with just a raise of his hand. However, Urumai wasn't some random dog or cat. The current Intercourse's strength was worlds apart from his. Urumai was ranked 90 among the Grand Wizards of Rakshasa State, which was more than 10 places higher than Sangar. How could he be scared by a young cultivator? Brat, if you want to die, then this Grand Wizard will fulfill your wish. Urumai didn't have the heart to argue with him. At this moment, he only wanted to absorb Goddess Hongyang's ghost nascent soul as soon as possible and improve his Grand Wizard body. After saying that, Yurimai punched towards Li Daochong. But Li Daochong didn't dodge at all. He simply raised his hand and blocked Yurimai's huge fist. Bang! Sparks of electricity flashed across Li Daochong's hand and entered Yurimai's arm. Yurimai didn't hold back in this punch. He didn't underestimate the cultivation of this young man who had appeared out of nowhere. Even though he didn't hold back, in Yurimai's opinion, his full-powered punch was enough to turn this person into minced meat. One had to know that even a peak cultivator like Goddess Hong Yang in the Yuanying state wouldn't be able to take a punch like this. It could even crush the mystic comprehending realm true treasures that human cultivators were proud of. Yurimai didn't expect that this young man would be able to block his full-powered punch so easily with a single hand. This punch could punch through mountains and rivers, but it looked weak and powerless at this moment. The power of the punch seemed to have been devoured by some invisible force and disappeared. Just being caught wasn't enough to make Yurimai panic. When the sparks of electricity flashed past, Yurimai's hair stood on end. Yang lightning of the spirit realm. This was the nightmare of all creatures of the Hades. Death aura surged out of Yurimai's body and blocked the lightning. He flew backwards and put a safe distance between himself and Li Daochong. Yurimai's expression changed slightly, and he snorted coldly. He was a little annoyed. He extended his hand, and the soul-devouring halberd that had just defeated Goddess Hong Yang appeared in his hand. Yurimai stopped flying backwards and turned into a streak of black light. He held the soul-devouring halberd and charged towards Li Daochong. "Be careful." Chapter 461. Li Daochong stared at Yurimai, who was charging at him like a bolt of lightning. His face was as cold as ice. He was truly furious, humiliating female cultivators, massacring cultivators, and destroying human cities. The scorched earth beneath his feet was filled with the smell of blood. How many soldiers and soldiers were buried under the scorched earth? The Rakshasa state invaded the Federation just to enslave humans and make them their food. In the eyes of the Dark Ghost, humans were no different from animals. After Li Daochong woke up, he rarely got angry. But now, he couldn't suppress the anger in his heart. It burned more and more fiercely. Blue-gold lightning shot out from Li Daochong's eyes. His entire body crackled as circles of electricity flowed up and down. Under the effect of the electricity, the spiritual energy around his body seemed to burst into blue flames, emitting a dazzling brilliance. The terrifying lightning-type spiritual energy instantly dispersed the surrounding deathly aura. Heavenly lightning technique, Eye of Lightning Punishment. Boom. 2 bolts of lightning shot out from Li Daochong's eyes. Yurimai didn't expect that this human cultivator, who only had the aura of a Jin Dan, could release such a shocking ability. By the time he realized it, it was already too late. How could he dodge at the speed of light? Yurimai roared as he stabbed out with the Soul Devourer halberd at full power. Black deathly aura condensed into a terrifying ghost face at the tip of the halberd. Since he couldn't dodge, he could only go all out. Boom, crackle, crackle, the berserk ghost face surged with deathly aura. It was terrifying. However, the moment it collided with the spiritual sun lightning, it was instantly annihilated and disappeared into nothingness. The lightning struck the Soul Devourer halberd, and all the souls within the shaman treasure exploded. The lightning passed through the halberd and landed on Yurimai's body. There was a crackle. Yurimai's grand wizard body was split in half by the lightning. From the inside to the outside, from top to bottom, there wasn't a single part of his 3-meter-long body that was intact. The Grand Wizard Dan was forcefully shattered. Yurimai didn't even have a chance to react before he was completely obliterated. Li Daochong didn't hold back. He released the full power of the Eye of Lightning Punishment and gathered all the lightning power together. Li Daochong's monstrous killing intent soared into the sky. He had never wanted to carry out a massacre as much as he did now. Killed a low-level Grand Wizard ghost. Soul power obtained, converted into spiritual energy. A wisp of black mist entered Li Daocheng's body. Purring, Li Daocheng's spirit qi suddenly increased, more and denser than ever before. The consumption of the Eye of Thunder punishment was instantly recovered. The steadily increasing spiritual energy constantly nourished the Sun Jin Dan in Li Daocheng's body, causing it to grow and solidify once again. The baby's shadow inside became clearer and clearer. In addition to the Jin Dan, the thunder ball hidden in the placenta below the Jin Dan condensed again, turning into a small blue sun the size of a bowl. His cultivation increased again. Even so, Li Daocheng didn't level up. He was still in the late Jin Dan stage, only a step away from the peak of the Jin Dan stage. Killing the Grand Wizard ghost gave him such a huge amount of spiritual energy, but he still couldn't level up. Li Daocheng was secretly shocked. If he entered the Yuanying stage, what kind of existence would he have to kill to level up? Killing monsters to cultivate wasn't that easy. Yurimai was insta-killed? When Yurimai was blasted into ashes by the 2 bolts of lightning, everything seemed to have stopped in that instant. The void, which had been filled with explosions just a moment ago, was deathly silent. The death of the Grand Wizard was enough to affect the battle. That was equivalent to the peak of the human Yuanying stage, or even a pseudo-soul formation stage mighty figure. Even in the entire Hades, the Grand Wizard could definitely dominate a part of the underworld. He was a general-level underworld ghost. The Ghost Wu army, which was having a good time killing in the void, was dumbfounded. The cultivators of the Cultivator army and the Vanguard army didn't know what was going on. They couldn't believe that what they were seeing was real. They all thought that they were hallucinating. The despair on Yu Yen and Goddess Hong Yang's faces hadn't disappeared. Their beautiful eyes were filled with confusion. They suspected that they were already dead, and that their souls were just hallucinating after death. Jin Dan cultivators could insta-kill the Grand Wizard ghost? Liar! The 2 female cultivators exclaimed in their hearts at the same time. Yu Yan's feelings were much more complicated than Goddess Hong Yang's. She thought back to when she tried to rope in Li Daocheng. She was mercilessly rejected by him time and time again. At that time, she was still a bit annoyed. She even thought that Li Daocheng was too conceited. Although the Vanguard army was the most dangerous military force, it was also the military force that received the most cultivation resources. As long as he joined the Vanguard army, with Li Daocheng's talent, his strength would increase by leaps and bounds. It would be good for him to join them. At least, that was what Yu Yen thought. Now, Yu Yen realized that Li Daocheng didn't need the conditions that most people thought were superior. Good boy, you hit it well. If I'm not dead, Li Daocheng, just you wait. If I don't trick you into my bed, I'll believe you. Yu Yan's pretty face returned to its usual flirtatious appearance. The despair in her eyes had completely disappeared. It was replaced by a hint of slyness and mischievousness. Goddess Hong Yang was shocked. She looked at Li Daocheng's back in disbelief. When did such a monster appear in the Federation? Why didn't she know about it? She had no impression of him at all. Qin Zhan, who was lying on the ground covered in blood, laughed. Li Daocheng, I still underestimated you. Intercourse, who had his shoulder pierced by Tsang ink and hung in the void, trembled slightly. Yang lightning was too terrifying. A Grand Wizard like Yurimai couldn't even resist it. Just who was this kid? Sanguine's body stiffened. How could this person's cultivation be even more terrifying than dark demons? Compared to the day before, how was he even stronger? His growth speed was even faster than dark demons. What the hell was going on? Sanguine was horrified. The more he thought about it, the more terrified he felt. His face darkened. He couldn't care less about his face. His life was more important. Without another word, he turned around and fled. His speed was faster than ever, as if his butt was on fire. Intercourse saw Sanguine run away and cursed inwardly, coward. Whoosh! Sanguine was as fast as an arrow. He thought that no one could catch up with him at full speed. Just as he was secretly congratulating himself for being smart, he heard the sound of something breaking through the air. Before Sanguine could react, Li Daochong had already appeared in the void in front of him. It was as if he had teleported. Sanguine was so frightened that his eyes bulged and his hair stood on end. He came to an emergency stop in the air. His huge body bared its fangs and brandished its claws, trying to grab something to stop his forward momentum. However, there was nothing to grab in the void. He looked quite comical. Since he was moving too fast, how could he stop just like that? Li Daochong hovered above Sanguine, motionless and indifferent as he watched the latter slide in front of him with a face full of fear. Sanguine stopped in front of Li Daochong, who raised his hand and punched him. This punch was like a cannonball. With a bang, it landed heavily on Sanguine's face. The unlucky Grand Wizard had just flown a few hundred meters into the sky, but in the next moment, he fell back to the ground like a meteor. Boom! Sanguine landed on the ground, creating a large crater. Thud! Li Daochong landed in front of Sanguine, leaned over, and punched. Bam, bam, bam! Intense muffled sounds rang out like thunder. Sanguine was like a huge sandbag lying on the ground. Punches rained down on him like a torrential rain. In more than 10 seconds, Li Daochong had repeatedly performed the first style of fist of rupture thousands of times. Black blood kept spurting out of Sanguine's fanged mouth. He wanted to beg for mercy, but he could not speak. The light in his bulging eyes quickly disappeared. The Grand Wizard's core was shattered under the storm-like punches. After the fight, Li Daochong turned around and slowly walked to the intercourse. The ghoul army in the void was all stunned for a moment. They were all subordinates that Sanguine had brought from Dasong County in Rakshasa State. Sanguine was their master, their king. The high and mighty county king was beaten into a pile of mud. The ghoul army, who had been full of momentum just now, was dumbfounded. The intercourse was scared half to death. Oluomai and Sanguine were killed in seconds, not to mention the current him. If he was in his peak state back then, the intercourse might not be afraid. But now, he was not even a Grand Wizard. The human cultivator in front of him could kill him with a flick of his finger. Respected human cultivator, how about we make a deal? Sanguine was quick-witted. His desire to live made him have no choice but to admit defeat. A deal. Li Daochong was neither fast nor slow. He looked at the intercourse and asked in a joking manner. That's right, a big deal. As long as you let me go, I can let all the ghoul army that attacked demon subduing city retreat and give you the location of a treasure. How about it? The intercourse said anxiously. Li Daochong, don't listen to him. The ghoul Hades has no credibility. He's full of lies. Yu Yen said anxiously after hearing this. Li Daochong glanced at Yu Yen and grinned. He did not respond. He turned to the intercourse and said faintly, I'm a person who likes to make deals. When Yu Yen heard this, she became impatient. When the intercourse heard this, he laughed. When the goddess Hong Yang heard this, her impression of Li Daochong instantly decreased. When Qin Zhan heard this, he shook his head slightly. This kid's strength was outstanding, but his temperament was still a bit lacking. He could not resist temptation. Powerful human cultivator, you're right. There's nothing that can't be discussed and traded. A wise man submits to circumstances. The intercourse smiled and heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. And you're right. I'm very angry right now. I'll use your life and the lives of those ghouls to extinguish my anger. Do you want to make this deal? Li Daochong said indifferently. The smile on the intercourse's face suddenly froze. No one expected that Li Daochong would suddenly change the topic and make a 180-degree turn. He was playing with the ghoul from the beginning. Poochie. Chapter 462. As soon as Li Daochong finished speaking, he stretched out his hand, and Song ink, which was inserted into Intercourse's shoulder, returned to his hand with a swoosh. Intercourse's body lost its support and fell from the sky to the ground. His eyes were filled with fear. He had thrown out such a great temptation, but the other party was not interested at all. Li Daochong smiled coldly. How could his anger be extinguished so easily? Li Daochong suddenly waved his blade, bringing out a round of Tsang Ink's brilliance, without any warning. At that moment, Intercourse was scared half to death. The moment that Tsang Ink's brilliance touched Intercourse's body, the night demon cloak activated and wrapped Intercourse up, disappearing without a trace. Tsang Ink's brilliance swept past Intercourse's position, flying dozens of meters and slanting into the sky. Li Daochong's pupils shrank slightly. Just now, a huge wave of death aura flashed over, but it quickly disappeared. Intercourse also disappeared. Li Daochong condensed his psychokinesis to the limit, but he could not detect the slightest bit of aura on Intercourse's body. This time, Intercourse did not use the night demon cloak to hide himself, but the spatial spiritual array on the night demon cloak was triggered, teleporting Intercourse away. In fact, Intercourse himself did not know that the night demon cloak had such a function. Otherwise, he would not have been so scared after seeing Li Daochong's anger. Outside Fengdu City, tens of thousands of kilometers away from demon-subduing city, Intercourse lay on his back at the foot of the city wall with a pale face, panting for breath. Half of his body was bleeding. That Tsang Ink's brilliance only brushed Intercourse once, and half of his body was almost split in half. Terrifying. So terrifying. Intercourse once again felt the terror of being on the verge of death. The last time, it was also thanks to this human cultivator. Protector Xiang, what's going on? Why is the night demon cloak sending me a distress signal? Intercourse was lost in thought when a cold female voice pierced through the air and rang in his ears. However, there was no one beside him. This voice was Wu Ho's Cherry Blossom Gauz's death telepathy transmission through space. Intercourse's heart skipped a beat when he heard the voice. Before the fear in his heart disappeared, another fear followed. Even a veteran which ghost like the Intercourse, who had been through a lot, couldn't take it. If that young man's cultivation was as terrifying as the god of slaughter, then Cherry Blossom Gauze was the devil of the abyss of the Hades. Intercourse had a bitter expression on her face. She didn't know how to answer Cherry Blossom Gauze's question. Guardian Xiang, your aura is chaotic, your wizard core is trembling, and your breathing is uneven. What are you afraid of? Cherry Blossom Gauze's voice rang out once again. Deep in the boundless starry sky, in a deep valley on a dead star of the Hades in Rakshasa state, Cherry Blossom Gauze sat in midair in a pool of blood at the bottom of the abyss. Her beautiful face was expressionless, and only her brows were slightly furrowed. Cherry Blossom Gauze had been cultivating when she suddenly sensed the warning signal from the night demon cloak. It was a secret device that Cherry Blossom Gauze had left behind when she gave the night demon cloak to the Intercourse. In addition to monitoring the Intercourse, it also gave him an extra life. Cherry Blossom Gauze had left a death telepathy restriction on the night demon cloak. It would only respond when she actively probed it, allowing her to see the Intercourse's every move. The death telepathy restriction would only be triggered when the night demon cloak encountered an attack it couldn't resist, and it would establish a connection with Cherry Blossom Gauze. It could instantly activate the short-distance teleportation function hidden in the night demon cloak. If it weren't for this, the Intercourse would have been dismembered by Li Daochong and chopped into minced meat by now. Wu Ho, that kid has also come to 13 Specter. The Intercourse adjusted her emotions and told the truth. You mean that Li Daochong? Cherry Blossom Gauze's tone changed. Yes. Are you sure you're not mistaken? Cherry Blossom Gauze was in disbelief. She had already used the spies hidden in the Shenghua Federation to collect information on Li Daochong after they parted ways at the old mansion. This guy called Li Daochong's whereabouts were extremely mysterious. There were very few records about him. Even though Cherry Blossom Gauze used a lot of her power, the information she obtained was very limited. Cherry Blossom Gauze believed that Li Daochong was a genius that the Federation focused on nurturing. The Federation would never allow a place like 13 Specter to come over. Empress Wu Ho, I'm more certain than ever, the intercourse replied. When she spoke, her eyes were slightly throbbing, as if she was anticipating something to happen. Get ready. We'll activate the Killing Rakshasa Gate in Fengdu City at noon tomorrow. I'm going to 13 Specter. Cherry Blossom Gauze, who was sitting in a pool of blood at the bottom of the dark abyss, suddenly opened her eyes. A red ray of light shot out from them. Cherry Blossom Gauze stuck out her small cherry tongue and licked her lip. Her expression was cold, and the flames of vengeance burned wildly in her eyes. When the intercourse heard this, a sinister smile appeared on his face. What he was looking forward to was Wu Ho's personal arrival. Li Daochong was too powerful. He could even kill a Grand Wizard in seconds. There weren't many Grand Wizard ghosts in 13 Specter that could suppress him. If Wu Ho didn't come personally, it would be difficult to deal with him. Li Daochong had made the intercourse feel the threat of death twice. The intercourse was both afraid and incomparably angry. He couldn't wait to tear this guy into pieces, but he was no match for him. Only if Wu Ho came personally could he subdue Li Daochong. When Wu Ho captured Li Daochong alive, a trace of ruthlessness flashed across the intercourse's eyes. At that time, he would definitely torture that brat to death. Demon Subduing City, Northwest City. Li Daochong's attack missed, and once again, the intercourse escaped. He was a little angry, but there was nothing he could do. The death aura that saved the intercourse actually made Li Daochong feel a trace of fear. To be able to make the current Li Daochong feel fear, how strong was the other party's death aura? However, Li Daochong wasn't angry for too long. He couldn't detect any traces of the intercourse, so he could only give up. Holding the Tsang ink in his hand, he soared into the sky. In an instant, the witch ghost army in the air became Li Daochong's target. Fight back? They couldn't even see where Li Daochong was, so how could they fight back? Hit the air? This was a one-sided massacre, a one-man massacre. What Li Daochong said to the intercourse was not a joke. He wanted the lives of all the witch ghosts, or else he wouldn't be able to calm the anger in his heart. Every slash would turn a witch ghost into a black rain and explode in the air, disappearing. The witch ghost army that everyone on 13 Specter was like a chicken or a dog in front of Li Daochong, one slash, one kill. If Li Daochong wasn't worried about accidentally injuring the cultivator army, he would have killed more than one witch ghost with a single slash. In a moment, the witch ghost army was utterly defeated and fled in all directions. However, their escape sped up their destruction. More than 200 witch ghosts were instantly annihilated by the Tsang ink's light. Not a single one was left. Beep, 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 the notifications in the depths of Li Daochong's sea of consciousness kept ringing, and strands of dark green mist were absorbed into his body. The spiritual energy crazily increased. 89th witch ghost has been killed. Soul power has been obtained. Host has leveled up to level 23. Li Daochong's experience bar increased at an astonishing speed. After killing the 89th witch ghost, he jumped from the late stage of Jin Dan to the peak stage of Jin Dan. The sun Jin Dan grew once again under the constant cleansing of spiritual energy, and the embryo of Yuanying inside became more and more condensed. When more than 200 witch ghosts were killed by Li Daochong, the sun Jin Dan had already grown to the size of a basketball. Li Daochong's aura was as majestic as the sea, dyeing the entire void light blue and dispersing the murky air. The remaining 100-plus cultivators of the vanguard army witnessed the entire process of the massacre. Even Goddess Hongyang might not be able to kill the witch ghost army like a flock of chickens like this young man. Li Daochong transformed into a god of war floating in the air, reflecting in the eyes of every hot-blooded cultivator of the vanguard army, leaving an indelible mark that was deeply engraved in their hearts. Below, Yu Yen and Qin Zhan were supported by a few cultivators as they looked up at the void. Lord Qin, we underestimated this brat. Yu Yen smiled faintly. Yeah, we underestimated him. Qin Zhan nodded. You know him? Why don't I have any impression of him? Goddess Hongyang, who had put on a new set of Taoist robes, couldn't help but ask. Qin Zhan and Yu Yen looked at each other and smiled. The former briefly explained Li Daochong's situation to Goddess Hongyang. This Yuanying Peak cultivator of the Federation looked at Li Daochong with curiosity in her eyes. After killing all of them, the fury in Li Daochong's heart subsided slightly. At this moment, Fang Yuliang, Grandma Feng Hua, and Su Wanqing arrived with more than 300 cultivators. However, the battle was already over. More than 700 people from the Federation's cultivation army died in battle, including 17 Yuanying cultivators, more than 600 combat cultivators in the vanguard group, 3 long-range spell cultivators, and more than 70 regular soldiers. The casualties were heavy. If one only looked at these numbers, this was a battle where the human cultivators had suffered a crushing defeat. However, the Rakshasa state's losses were even more terrifying. More than 3,000 demons and monsters were killed or injured, 328 witches were killed, and 2 grand wizard dukes had fallen. This string of numbers was even more shocking. The northwest stronghold of the demon-subduing city was finally saved by Li Daochong's divine weapon. It was also because Sanji had mobilized a large number of witches to attack the northwest stronghold that the pressure on the human cultivators of the other strongholds of the demon-subduing city was greatly reduced. After this battle, the demon-subduing city entered a short period of rest. Li Daochong had undoubtedly become the hero in the eyes of all the cultivators in the northwest stronghold. The news quickly spread to the Central Federation. It immediately stirred up 1,000 waves in the central starfield. Li Daochong entered the Federation's central government and the upper echelons of the cultivation army's focus list, and jumped to the first position. However, the Federation's government kept this highly confidential and contacted Qin Zhan, asking him to arrange for Li Daochong to leave 13 Specter as soon as possible. Chapter 463. The battle at the northwest stronghold of the City of Demon Subduing was called the Battle of Demon Suppression by later generations. Unfortunately, there were not many images of this battle. There were only some blurry fragments. All the records of this battle came from words and interviews with witnesses. However, the name of Rado Shinji began to spread. The image of Li Daochong holding the Tsang ink saber and electric sparks flowing all over his body was deeply engraved in the hearts of every witness. In the central star zone of the Shenghua Federation, the number 1 cultivation planet of the Federation, Shenghua Planet, in a towering immortal forest building, an impromptu meeting was being held in the Congress of the Federation. 8 of the 18 members of the Senate came in person, and the other 10 participated remotely through holographic spirit video. The president of the Federation, Yu Huaqing, was holding the urgent letter that had just been handed to him. Yu Huaqing had been worried and restless these days. The Rakshasa state suddenly launched a crazy attack on the Federation, and the frontline battlefield was losing again and again. The 9-ring star zone almost fell. If it weren't for the 2 semi-god realm cultivators of the Federation, the Rakshasa state would have already attacked the 4-ring star zone. What Yu Huaqing was most worried about was not the outer ring star zone. Even if it was occupied, they would only lose some territory, and they could get it back in the future. What the president of the Federation was most worried about was 13 Specter, a strange planet that had no orbit and was flying freely in the Federation. 13 Specter and the star it was orbiting not only flew at high speed in the starry sky, but also performed space jumps from time to time. They would appear anywhere in the Federation without any trace. Once it was occupied by the Rakshasa state, the Federation would never have a day of peace, and it would not be far from being fully invaded by the Rakshasa state. Yu Huaqing wanted to send a semi-god realm cultivator to suppress 13 Specter, but the Rakshasa state was already prepared. The Grand Wizard sent out hundreds of people to attack the Federation. There were only 4 semi-god realm cultivators in the Federation, and 3 of them went to the Nine Rings Star Zone to help. Another Soul Formation Grand Cultivator stayed in the Central Planet region to prevent the Rakshasa state from launching a sneak attack. Yu Huaqing only hated the fact that there were too few Soul Formation Grand Cultivators in the Federation. The 4 of them could not take care of everything. No matter how intense the battle with the 13 Specter was, there was nothing he could do. Originally, they were going to give up on the front line and let the Soul Formation Grand Cultivators stationed in the Eastern Star region go to 13 Specter. In the end, the think tank analyzed that 13 Specter was most likely trying to create a diversion. If they gave up on the Eastern front line, the Specter army would flood into the Federation. Even though 13 Specter was of great strategic importance, and losing it would affect the war in the future, it would not be as effective as the front line. The loss of 13 Specter would at least not immediately pose a threat to the Federation. Once the front line was lost, the rear would soon suffer. After a discussion with the 18 counselors, Yu Huaqing gave up on the idea of sending Soul Formation Grand Cultivators to 13 Specter. He could only send some elite troops to 13 Specter to deal with the Grand Wizard of the Rakshasa state and hold on for as long as they could. But even so, they were still struggling. The elite troops had suffered heavy casualties in 13 Specter. Yu Huaqing had no choice but to let the university students join the battle. All the students of the Cultivation Department of North Star University were mobilized. Tens of thousands of students went to the battlefield. But more than a week had passed and there was still no good news from 13 Specter. Yu Huaqing began to doubt whether there was a problem with his judgment. As the president of the Federation, every decision Yu Huaqing made would affect the fate of the entire Federation. Once he made a mistake, Yu Huaqing might become a sinner of the Federation. The catastrophe 1,000 years ago would happen again. For the past 1,000 years, the cultivators of the Shenghua Federation had fought bloody battles and kept the Rakshasa state out of the Nine Rings planet region. They had held on for hundreds of years. If they were ruined by Yu Huaqing, he would not be able to face his ancestors. Yu Huaqing thought of going to the battlefield himself. Yuaning's peak cultivation was still useful to him. However, Yu Huaqing's idea was quickly rejected by the Senate. If Yu Huaqing went to 13 Specter, it would be strange if the Grand Wizard of the Rakshasa state did not personally come to capture him. The president was the symbol and representative of the entire Federation. If he was captured alive, the Federation would become the biggest joke of the last Pure Land in the spirit realm. Moreover, the Federation government needed someone to command and the cultivation army needed someone to deploy. The president's duty was not to fight, but to command. This didn't work, that didn't work. Yu Huaqing was truly at his wit's end. It wasn't until an urgent letter was sent from Nether Demon Star an hour ago that Yu Huaqing's anxiety eased a little. Li Daochong's name officially appeared in front of Yu Huaqing for the first time. There were a total of 18 senators in the Federation's Senate. They came from 9 star regions, 2 from each star region. They were the decision-makers of the entire Federation. All major matters were discussed by the 18 of them, and then voted to decide what to do. They were commonly known as the 18 Arhats of the Federation. These 18 people were not powerful cultivators. At least, most of them were not. Only 3 or 4 senators were Yuanian cultivators, while the rest were Jin Dan cultivators. Almost none of them were battle-type cultivators. All of them were intelligent cultivators. Half of them were spirit cultivators, while the other half were mainly artificers, spirit sequencers, and alchemists. These cultivators had very strong analytical abilities and could quickly make the most correct choice. I oppose the God General's going to 13 Specter. I oppose it too. Seconded. A series of objections quickly drowned out Yu Huaqing's proposal. The president's expression did not look too good. After the 18 Arhats expressed their opinions, Yu Huaqing's expression darkened. I'm just informing you that the God Generals must go. Mr. President, what you're doing is too risky. Every member of the Divine Generals is the biggest trump card of the Federation. Losing any one of them will be a huge loss to the Federation, an old man with white hair and eyebrows said in a serious tone. Yes, Huaqing, you have to think twice. Is it worth it to lose a dozen geniuses for one? No matter how you look at it, it's not worth it. Another councilman added. Lose a dozen geniuses? Senator Yi, is the God General so useless in your eyes? Is 13 Specter a dragon's lair or a tiger's den? The God Generals were established to complete special missions. If they can't even save one person, what's the point of having the God Generals? Are they just for decoration? Yu Huaqing asked coldly. Senator Ye's expression also turned cold. He was one of the 8 senators present at the meeting today. Chapter 464. Hearing Counselor Ye's words, Yu Huaqing sneered. Counselor Yi, a young man in the late Jin Dan stage, was able to kill 2 Grand Wizard consecutively. Even if he can't reach the Soul Formation stage, this achievement alone is enough for the Divine Generals to rescue him from 13 Specter. Jin Dan killed a Grand Wizard, Counselor Yi, even the Divine Generals couldn't do it back then, right? Counselor Ye's expression was uncertain. He tried to find words to refute, but he couldn't think of a good reason. Everyone present knew what it meant for Jin Dan to kill a Grand Wizard. Cultivation was only a basic standard to judge a cultivator's strength, but it didn't represent everything. Cultivators of the same level weren't equal in strength. The gap between some cultivators was even greater than the gap between levels. Everyone in the Federation knew how terrifying Grand Wizard dark ghosts were. They were creatures of the Hades that were above Yuanying. At the very least, they were comparable to a cultivator in the late Yuanying stage. A high-level Grand Wizard was in the Soul Formation stage. It was unimaginable that someone could kill a low-level Grand Wizard while still in the Jin Dan stage. Mr. President, this young man named Li Daochong has very limited information. He suddenly appeared and killed 2 Grand Wizard consecutively. Is his identity reliable? A counselor who wasn't present asked through the holographic projection. His identity is reliable. I've already pulled up all the information about Li Daochong from his birth until he entered 13 Specter, Yu Huaqing said confidently. I've already sent the information to everyone. You can take a look. Li Daochong is a member of the Federation through and through. His father, Li Tianyang, is also a soldier. Li Tianyang? Counselor Yi was deep in thought. Zhang Anshu, who was standing next to Senator Yi, seemed to have thought of something as well. He used his telekinesis to check the information sent by Yu Huaqing and said, Mr. President, isn't Li Tianyang the main character of the traitor incident that caused a stir last year? Counselor Ye's eyes lit up. He also remembered this matter and quickly said, Mr. President, Li Tianyang's matter hasn't been completely concluded yet. It's still unknown whether this guy was infected by the Hades during the time he went missing. If sorcerer ancestor Xing Paoluo personally made a move, even a soul formation stage mighty figure wouldn't be able to detect it. Li Daochong is his son, and Jin Dan killed the Grand Wizard. I didn't see it with my own eyes, so I can't comment too much. However, don't you think there's something fishy about it? Counselor Yi paused halfway and glanced at the others. Finally, his gaze landed on Yu Huaqing, and he continued. The information is very clear. Before Li Tianyang's incident, this Li Daochong was a loser who was spurned by the locals. His spirit meridians were dried up and he was a cripple. What's strange is that after Li Tianyang's incident, this loser with the dried-up spirit meridians suddenly became a different person. He slowly rose to prominence and caused quite a stir in the fourth ring star zone. I just want to say, can a dried-up spirit meridians be cured? Who has such great ability today? Even the three great cultivation empires don't have such cultivation technology, right? May I ask how this Li Daochong recovered? Even if he can recover, a loser with a dried-up spirit meridians not only recovered but also became a super genius. Doesn't this seem a bit too unbelievable? Don't you think it's strange? As far as I know, there's only one way to recover a dried-up spirit meridian, which is to sell your soul to Hades and let the voodoo ancestor implant voodoo blood into your spirit meridians to turn the dried-up spirit meridians into voodoo meridians. This method is recorded in the book Many Underworld Techniques Research. When the catastrophe came back then, the voodoo ancestor used the voodoo blood to create a group of powerful voodoo cultivators. These voodoo cultivators looked no different from human cultivators on the surface and could freely mix among human cultivators to assassinate. Mr. President, the book Many Underworld Techniques Research is a compulsory book for all government officials of the Federation. Don't you know about it? The other 17 counselors remained silent, but their expressions changed slightly. The voodoo cultivators were extremely powerful. A foundation establishment cultivator could kill Jin Dan, a Jin Dan could kill Yuanying, and a Yuanying could kill a soul formation cultivator. They were similar to the voodoo ancestors' small avatars. In the past, the existence of the voodoo cultivators had brought a lot of trouble to the human race. To this day, it was still a kind of dark art that the Federation was extremely afraid of. Mr. President, what Counselor Yi said is not unreasonable. The appearance of this Li Daochong is too strange. In less than 2 years, he cultivated from a disabled person to a Jin Dan. His combat ability is also so terrifying. Before we figure out the reason, I don't think he is worth using the divine generals. The old man with white hair and eyebrows who spoke at the beginning continued. We have to guard against the disaster of the voodoo cultivators. If that Li Daochong is really a chess piece set up by the Rakshasa state, sending him to the divine generals would not only waste the limited resources of the Federation, but also might cause the entire divine generals to be wiped out, another counselor said worriedly. Yu Huaqing's expression was uncertain. As the president of the Federation, he had too many things to consider. No suggestion could be ignored. The dispute between Counselor Yi and Yu Huaqing was not new. The two of them had been at odds for 100 years. No matter what suggestion Yu Huaqing made, Counselor Yi would use various reasons to make things difficult for him. This was just one of the countless objections, and Yu Huaqing had long been accustomed to it. However, even if Yu Huaqing knew that Counselor Yi was deliberately going against him, he could not ignore what he said. Moreover, what Counselor Yi said was not unreasonable. Li Daochong's appearance was indeed a little abrupt. His cultivation speed was unprecedented. Since the establishment of the Shenghua Federation, it seemed that there had never been such a freak. Even the current number 1 person in the Federation, the late-stage divine transformation realm god Tsang-Shi Tian, was not as good as him. After that Tsang-Shi Tian's spiritual meridian was awakened, he was already at the middle stage of the Jin Dan in 2 years. Li Daochong was already at the late stage of the Jin Dan in less than 2 years after his spiritual meridian was restored. This was already shocking enough. Li Daochong was also able to kill 2 Grand Wizard. This freak seemed to be a little too much. A great cultivator whose combat strength was on par with Yuanying's peak. Not to mention the Shenghua Federation, there were probably not many such geniuses in the 3 great cultivation empires. If there were 10 such freaks in the entire human race, it would not be long before the Rakshasa state invading the Shenghua Federation, but the Shenghua Federation invading the Rakshasa state. Yu Huaqing considered it again and again. After listening to the 18 Arhat's suggestions, he finally decided to send 2 god generals to 13 Specter. However, the mission was changed. It was no longer to rescue Li Daochong from 13 Specter. Instead, it was to secretly investigate whether Li Daochong was a wizard cultivator and kill a few more grand wizard to relieve the pressure on 13 Specter's cultivation army. The mission was to last for 10 days. In fact, 13 Specter already had 1 god general member, the goddess Hong Yang. However, Yu Huaqing had also received news that the goddess Hong Yang was seriously injured. The situation on 13 Specter was not optimistic. If Li Daochong was not a wizard cultivator, it would definitely be great news for the Shenghua Federation. However, if he was a wizard cultivator, it would be a disaster for the Shenghua Federation. Based on Li Daochong's combat strength, which was able to kill 2 grand wizard in seconds, it was almost impossible for the 2 god generals to capture him alive. Yu Huaqing watched as Chu Tianqi and Kong Lanxin walked into the teleportation array. He nodded slightly at the 2 god generals and personally activated the teleportation array to send the 2 to 13 Specter. This secret teleportation array could directly teleport the 2 god generals to an island on 13 Specter's remote demon sea. Yu Huaqing's expression dimmed as he watched the 2 god generals disappear into the teleportation array. He suddenly had no idea whether Li Daochong was a wizard cultivator or not. The higher-ups of the Federation's cultivation army had also received orders to temporarily place Li Daochong on the observation list. Note: to be investigated. The commander of the Northwest Army of the Cultivation Army, Victorious Army, was the first high-ranking general to know that 13 Specter had gone to the Northwest Stronghold to suppress the demons. When Victorious Army learned that this young man named Li Daochong had killed 2 grand wizard in a row, he laughed loudly and immediately issued a letter of appointment. Victorious Army had been in the military all his life. After graduating from the Grand Pass Combat Academy, he had been fighting on the front lines against the dark ghosts of Rakshasa state. Decades had passed, and Victorious Army was swift and decisive in his actions. He was fair in his rewards and punishments, and his personality was also very bandit. This outstanding general of the Federation was not so cunning. Victorious Army never cared about one's background. They only cared about one's ability. If one had the ability, they would use it, even if one was a card slave. After watching a short video and the battle report, Victorious Army immediately appointed Li Daochong as the commander of the 38th Division of the Northwest Army. The commander of the 38th Division of the Northwest Army had died half a month ago on the front lines, and the deputy commander was temporarily in command. In fact, after Victorious Army issued this order, many high-ranking generals in the Northwest Army voiced their objections. There was no other reason. They all said that Li Daochong was too young. How could he become a commander at the age of 20? Even if he was strong, that was only in single combat. Commanding an army was a different matter. Victorious Army stood his ground against the objections and only said one sentence: "There is no difference in strength. If any of you don't agree, go and kill 2 grand wizard for fun. If you do, I'll even King let you sit in my position, let alone the commander of the 38th Division." As soon as these words were said, the objections immediately disappeared. Although they were unhappy, they did not dare to say anything else. Kill 2 grand wizard? Wasn't that King courting death? The ranks of positions in the cultivation army were completely based on strength, unlike the Federation government officials, where the ranks were not based on cultivation strength. Take the Northwest Army for example. The number 1 expert in the entire army was the commander of Victorious Army, a peak great cultivator of Yuanying. Below him was the deputy commander, who was also a peak great cultivator of Yuanying. Below him were the commanders of 10 divisions, all of whom were late-stage cultivators of Yuanying. In the entire army, the number of people who could really compete with a Grand Wizard could be counted with 2 hands. If the others challenged a Grand Wizard alone, they would just be courting death. However, before Victorious Army's appointment letter was sent out, the central government sent an urgent letter. There were only 7 words. Li Daochong would not be appointed for the time being. Motherf * Cur. Victorious Army slammed the urgent letter in his hand on the table and cursed. A bunch of indecisive, pedantic people. What the hell are they thinking all day long? Why aren't they appointing such a good talent? Are they waiting for the Rakshasa state to assassinate him? Victorious Army could only curse. He could not disobey the orders of the higher-ups, so he could only temporarily keep Li Daochong's appointment letter. On 13 Specter, Li Daochong naturally did not know about the game between the higher-ups of the Federation after he killed the 2 Grand Wizard. Of course, he did not need to know. After Li Daochong entered the cultivation room, he immediately began to consolidate his cultivation. This was a compulsory course every time he converted a large amount of soul power. Otherwise, he would lose a large amount of spiritual energy and waste it. After a day and night of meditation, Li Daochong finally absorbed and digested all the spiritual energy and merged it into a part of his body. The Sun Jin Dan in his body grew once again. When Li Daochong opened his eyes, the pair of dark eyes became deep blue, like a blue star in the starry sky. Blue-gold lightning flashed in the depths of his eyes. Li Daochong opened the door of the cultivation room and stepped out. As soon as he stepped out, he was stunned. There were 2 neat rows of cultivators standing outside. As soon as these soldiers saw Li Daochong come out, they bowed to him at the same time and said in unison, "Welcome back, Senior." The sound wave was like a tide, neat and uniform, vigorous and powerful. Li Daochong had a strange look on his face, but before he could react, a beautiful red figure floated over and a jade-like white arm dangled unscrupulously on his shoulder. Xiao Chongchong, thank you for saving me. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.